professionals, that is Webtel is celebrating CA week, where we have come up with a special offer for all chartered accountants, that is CA week special offer. As we all are aware that online presence is crucial for any organization or firm to reach potential clients beyond the boundaries. That's why in this CA week special offer, CA professionals can give a brand new online presence to their CA firm with a professional website by virtual office at an initial booking amount of rupees 1,999. If you also want to give a brand new online presence to your CA firm, then hurry up and claim CA week special offer by giving us a call or mailing us. Contact details for the same are mentioned in the image displayed on your screen. Now, let me tell you briefly about Webtel. So, as we are living in the era of digitalization, where everything from simple to complex demands eases with technology, here is why Webtel believes in making IT a way of life. We are India's one of the leading e-compliance companies known for its compliance management, office management, and HR management solutions. We have incorporated a knowledge academy as well, where you all can do your learnings by opting for self-paced courses, staying in line with the blogs, keeping pace with webinars, etc. Today, we are celebrating 5 years of GST in association with AFTP, presented by our renowned speakers and moderators. So, our moderator of the day is CA Rajiv Khandelwal, and our speakers are CA Tushar Aggarwal, CA Rohini Aggarwal, CA Kapil Sharma, and Advocate Sudipta Bhattacharjee. A brief intro of AFTP. So AFTP vision is to provide qualified opportunities to members designed to enhance their professional development, continuing education, peer-to-peer networking, and ongoing member benefits in order to improve services to our respective clientele. So now let me introduce to our moderator and speakers of the day. Our first moderator is CA Rajiv Khandelwal. He is a fellow chartered accountant of ICAI. He is also DISA, ICAI, a certified systems auditor. He is also an alumnus of Sri Ram College of Commerce and has over 3 decades of experience in the compliance sector. Mr. Khandelwal has addressed thousands of webinars and seminars so far on compliances at various forums such as NASCOM, ICAI, ICSI, ICWA, and various study circles. Now, talking about GST, the GST, which completely redesigned the nation's indirect tax system and drastically altered tax administration and compliances, was rolled out at the stroke of midnight on July 1, 2017, marking the country's biggest reform in the indirect tax system in half a decade. GST touted to be India's most comprehensive tax reform in decades and is based on the principle of one nation, one market, one tax. So the biggest benefit of introduction of GST was that it subsumed around 11 taxes, all kind of indirect taxes and 13 cesses. But under the current GST regime, there are 4 GST rates. I think you all must be knowing that is 5% for essential items, 28% is the top rate. And then there are 2 other slabs of 12 and 18%. Besides, there's also a special 3% rate for gold, jewelry, precious stones, etc. And you get a new slab for 6% is also introduced lately. So there are many positives and negatives, you can say, or you can say shortcomings in the GST. So some of the positives and shortcomings will also be shared by our speakers, and along with that we'll be discussing the outcomes of 47th GST Council meet, which is an important meeting which was held like 2-3 days back only. So the outcomes of 47 GST Council meet will be discussed by CA Tushar Aggarwal sir. He is our first speaker of the day. He has more than 10 years of experience in indirect tax and has worked for more than 8 years with Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridhan attorneys. He was deployed by the GSTN for GST implementation and has worked closely with government officials. He has worked extensively with the Government of India GST in designing GST returns, audits, and other formats. Our second speaker is Rohini Aggarwal. She is a chartered accountant. cost and management accountant, as well as a law graduate with over 28 years of academic and industry experience. She has written various books on GST, service tax, and corporate laws. She assisted World Bank in completing their prestigious doing business project relating to indirect taxes in India. Presently, she is working as a principal consultant with ARX Business Advisors LLP. Our third speaker is Kapil Kumar Sharma, who is a partner in Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridhar attorney, involved in transaction advisory practice of the firm. He has more than 12 years of experience in indirect tax advisories. He has advised clients on wide range of indirect tax matters, including matters pertaining to newly introduced GST in India. He specializes in structuring business operations, devising supply chain, identifying and advising on tax efficient business models, etc. He has been involved deeply with real estate, hospitality, and infrastructure sector for optimizing their operations in tax optimal manner over the last decade. He has been an active speaker at various national and international seminars, workshops, and conferences organized on indirect taxation, and has many research papers and articles in reputed national and international journals to his credit. Our next speaker is Sudipta Bhattacharjee. He is a lawyer with more than 17 years of experience specializing in indirect tax advisory, including GST, custom, international trade, pre-GST indirect taxes, state excise laws, as well as building sales, litigation and contract documentation. Sudipta sir has been recognized as highly regarded in indirect tax by World Tax since 2020 and has been repeatedly recognized as an indirect tax leader for India by International Tax Review since 2017. So now I'll be handing over to Mr. Tushar Aggarwal, sir, for 47 GST Council meet updates. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nitika. I'm just sharing my screen.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Good evening, friends. At the outset, I would like to thank AFTP and Webtel for giving me this opportunity. Friends, we have completed 5 years of GST implementation, and in last 5 years, we have seen various ups and downs. To me, at a broader level, implementation of GST has been a success in India. What we have achieved? First, the vision of one nation, one tax. Today, we don't have to see whether I have to purchase material from Maharashtra or Gujarat or Haryana. Earlier, we used to have various different VAT rates across India, and accordingly, we have to plan our purchases and supply chain management. Now, it's a single law, single rates applicable across India. It's a single law. You have to file and go to a single portal for filing your returns, unlike in pre-GST, wherein you had various return formats, etc. So from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, it's a single law which is prevailing, and that is some of the most important achievement which we have achieved. Second, the cascading effect. Earlier, say I was a service provider, I was not eligible to get credit of VAT, etc. Today, this problem of cascading effect has gone. Though there are challenges related to block credits, etc. But when we compare it from pre-GST regime, yes, we have minimized it at a greater level. Third is the digitization and automation in GST. The way e-invoicing has been implemented, the way e-bill provisions have been implemented, they are going smoothly. So if we see the journey of last 5 years, there are various plus points. However, there has been challenges. For example, the principle of matching, the way it has been implemented in India, it has created chaos. Second is the way law has been amended. We have seen hundreds of clarification, amendments, notification, rate changes, etc. And this has actually resulted in understanding the law at ground level a little difficult because of the regular changes. However, one important point which we all must note is that, and we should appreciate, is that at least the government is considering the representations filed by the industry. they are open to discussion, and that's why we have various issues being settled by way of issuing various clarification, etc. And in this 47th GST Council meeting also, they have come up with some very great clarifications also for the industry. There are various other amendments related to rates and exemption also. We will be discussing all this in our webinar. Moving on. So what I will do is that, considering the timelines, I will be discussing only the major amendments and major clarifications by 47th GST Council meeting. The first one relates to the real estate sector. One of the important points clarified by the council is on sale of developed plot, the taxability of sale of developed plots. Friends, we are aware as of now, whether GST is applicable on sale of developed plots, there is an ambiguity. Department at ground level is coming and demanding GST on sale of developed plots. When we see the advance rulings, we have both kind of advance rulings, positive as well as negative. Negative says that you are doing development work, you are not selling the land as it is. There is a common area being developed by you, and hence there is a service element which is involved. Accordingly, tax has to be paid. When we see the positive ruling, they say what I am selling is only a bare shell of land, a piece of land. The common areas which I develop, I only give right to use the common area. I'm not selling the common areas like road, park, sewerage line which is being developed. Only the right to use is given, and what is sold is the land which is covered under Schedule 3, and this common area effectively after 5 years goes to the authority, and hence no GST should be levied. So we have various kinds of ruling, both positive and negative, and at ground level, departmental people are always treating this transaction as taxable. When we see the industry approach also, industry recently has started this charging GST on the development part, which is involved in this sale of developed plot. So few developers, what they have done, they have started bifurcating the consideration received from the client into two parts. One for sale of land, second for the development charges. That is the common area development charges. Now, in this council meet, the government has clarified that sale of developed plots will not be leviable to tax. And what the exact language they are using, very important to note. Sale of land after leveling, laying down of drainage lines, etc. is a sale of land and does not attract GST. So it seems this clarification is for sale of developed plots only, and it's a welcome clarification. But we will be waiting for the detailed circular to be issued by the government, because what they have written here is only in respect of leveling activity and drainage lines which are laid down. What about other common areas if I'm developing? So let's wait for the detailed circular, but prima facie, it's a welcome clarification on sale of developed plot. Similarly, we have a welcome clarification on the PLC charges, which I am recovering. Though they have clarified this in the context of long-term lease of plots. What the government has said, allowing choice of location of a plot is a part of supply of long-term lease of plot of land. Therefore, location charge or preferential location charges are part of consideration charged for long-term lease of land and shall get the same treatment and GST. So PLC is nothing. PLC is an extra charge which you recover because of the advantage and attributable to a plot. For example, sea-facing plot, garden-facing plot, corner plot. So it's not a separate service which you are supplying when you are recovering preferential location charges. These charges fall part of your basic price only. And that's what is clarified by the government, and it will be equally applicable for sale of under construction units and other areas also. So it's a very welcome clarification. So henceforth, the rate of tax on PLC will be same as it is applicable on basic sale price when you are selling the under construction units to the customer. It's a very welcome clarification for the real estate sector. Another major amendment is in respect of changes in rate of tax applicable on works contract. Friends, there were various categories of works contract which were covered under 12% GST rate. Since they were charging 12% GST, they used to had a problem of inverted duty structure, that is IT accumulation issues. So they had to go for refund, etc. Now what the government has done is that the GST Council, in order to avoid claim of refund on account of inverted duty structure, has proposed to change the rate of following works contract services. And what are the works contract involved? Works contract for roads, bridges, railways, metros, etc. from 12% to 18%. Works contracts applied to central government and state government, local authorities for construction of pipelines, dams, water supply, educational institutions, hospitals, etc. They all have been increased from 12% to 18%. Similarly, works contracts supplied to central and state government involving predominantly earthwork, etc., has been increased from 5% to 12%. So there has been a change in the rate of works contract. So all the EPC contractors and infrastructure companies who are involved in construction of roads, bridges, educational institutions, hospitals, etc., they should look at their tender, their contract specifically. All these changes will be, all rate changes will be applicable from 18th of July. I repeat, all these changes will be applicable from 18th of July, and accordingly, they have to change their IT system, also talk to their customer for raising the invoice on enhanced GST rate. So all these action point has to be taken before 18th of July so that the same can be implemented from 18th. Moving on to the logistic and transportation sector. Today, as a GTA, Goods Transport Agency, a GTA has two options to pay tax. One is 12% GST, second is 5% GST. So under 12% GST, the tax has to be paid under forward charge mechanism. So GTA raises tax invoice at the rate of 12% on forward charge mechanism. And under this method, they are eligible to avail input tax credit on the purchases of trucks, etc. Second option is 5% under RCM. In this case, GTA is not in a position to avail credit on its procurement. They raise their tax invoice, and it is the recipient who has to pay under reverse charge GST rate at the rate of 5%. So we have two mechanisms, 12% and 5%. Further, the way law is worded today, it says that this 12% mechanism, if opted, then it has to be exercised continuously and you cannot get back to reverse charge again. So if you opt for 12% mechanism under forward charge, then you have to opt for this mechanism only and you cannot come back to reverse charge mechanism. So this is the law which is prevailing today. Now, what they have changed, the changes proposed by the council is, first, they are giving an additional option under forward charge mechanism to pay GST at the rate of 5% without input tax credit. So henceforth, we will be having two options under forward charge mechanism. One is with 12% GST in which ITC will be available. Second is 5% GST under forward charge mechanism. No ITC will be available on my procurement. However, my customer need not to pay under reverse charge again, since I will be paying under 5% on forward charge mechanism. The option of RCM will continue as it is. So effectively, GTA may pay under 12% under forward charge mechanism, or they may opt for 5% either forward charge or reverse charge. Further, they have clarified that this option has to be exercised at the beginning of the year. So we await the final clarification and notification in this regard, because one of the most important questions which is remaining to be answered is whether it is possible that if I opt for FCM mechanism, say I opt for GST rate at the rate 12% on forward charge mechanism at inception of the financial year, can I later change it to RCM after the end of the financial year or vice versa? So we await for the final clarification and rate notification to answer these questions. And again, related to this sector, they have made certain changes in various exemption notifications. For example, transportation of passenger by air services in a business class in flights originating or landing at northeastern states, the exemption has gone away and it is restricted only to economy class. Similarly, transportation by rail or a vessel of railway equipments and material exemption has been discontinued. They have changed the GST rate of transportation of goods and passenger by ropeways from 18% to 5%, which is a welcome clarification. Moving on to the e-commerce industry. Today, friends, what is happening is that as a seller, as a supplier, if I supply goods on an e-commerce platform, I have to take registration irrespective of my threshold limit. So the benefit of threshold limit is not available if I am supplying the goods through e-commerce platform. If my sale is of 10 lakh rupees, but I supply a single penny from an e-commerce platform, then I have to take registration under the GST law. The benefit of threshold is not available to us. Now, what the government has proposed is that and it's a very welcome amendment, but how practical it will be to implement is a question. And what is the amendment? They have waived the mandatory registration for suppliers supplying through ECO. They are saying that if I am within the threshold limit, then I will continue to enjoy the benefit of threshold exemption, even if I supply through ECO, that is economic e-commerce platform. However, my supply should not be in the course of interstate taxable supply. I repeat, even if I am supplying through ECO, e-commerce operator platform, I need not take registration till the time my threshold is not crossed. That is, my threshold of 40 lakhs is not crossed, but I should be making only intrastate supply and not interstate supplies. Now, friends, let me ask you a very practical question. If you get yourself registered on an e-commerce platform, say Amazon, Flipkart, etc., you are based out of Delhi. The law is saying you continue the threshold exemption if you are supplying only, you are making only an intrastate supply through ECO. But practically, customer from Amazon and Flipkart can be from Delhi, Haryana, Noida, any state, any place. It will be very hard for us to think of a situation wherein I'm registered in an e-commerce platform and my customer is also from the very same state where I am located, and I'm not in a position to make any interstate supply. So if I get registered under an economic platform, e-commerce platform, so practically there will be interstate supplies also. And to my mind, this amendment and this beneficial amendment which they have brought, it may not be implemented practically at ground level. Moving on to some of the amendments under the FMCG sector, and this is one of the most interpretational and important amendment made. Friends, today, if I am supplying non-branded food items like dal, rice, grains, etc., I don't supply them under a brand name. I don't have a registered brand name, etc. No GST is charged. GST is leviable only on branded food items when sold under a brand name. Now, what they have done, very important, and let me read it exactly. GST Council has recommended to curtail the coverage of exemption by way of excluding from it pre-packaged and pre-labeled retail packs in terms of Legal Metrology Act, including pre-packaged, pre-labeled curd, lassi, and buttermilk. So what they are saying is that if you are supplying rice, dal, and all other food items, etc., which you were enjoying and for which you were enjoying GST exemption, now if you are supplying it in a pre-packaged and pre-labeled retail pack, you will be required to discharge GST on such product. What do you mean by pre-packaged and pre-labeled retail pack? As per the Legal Metrology Act, pre-packaged commodity means a commodity which, without the purchaser being present, is placed in a package of whatever nature, whether sealed or not, so that the product contained therein has a predetermined quantity. Further, label means any written, marked, stamped, printed, or graphic matter affixed to or appearing upon any pre-packaged commodity. So if I'm selling a packet of, say, a 5 kg packet of rice, it is pre-packed. And since I'm selling it in a retail, Legal Metrology Act and FSSI Act is applicable on me, and accordingly I have to declare my company name and all other requisite as per the Legal Metrology Act. When I'm declaring my company name and all other product information, etc., is it a label attached to it? Label is defined very widely. It means any written, mark, stamp, printed, or graphic matter affixed to it or appearing upon any pre-packaged commodity. So all these scenarios will be covered under the GST law, and accordingly there will be a GST implication on all pre-packaged and pre-labeled food packs for which the exemption were being enjoyed. Moving on to the healthcare sector, some of the major amendments proposed. First is the amendment related to the room rent charged by hospitals. Government has proposed that the room rent, if it exceeds rupees 5,000 per day per patient, is charged by the hospital, the same shall be taxed at the rate of 5% without ITC. So there will be a tax on the room rent if the value of the room rent is more than 5,000 rupees per day per patient. And accordingly, they are bringing the same under the ambit of GST by levying GST at the rate of 5%. But friends, is a room rent a supply in itself to the customer? Am I supplying a room rent services to the patients in the hospital? Or is it the treatment and a medical treatment, medical healthcare services which is supplied to the patient? No patient goes there for taking the room on rent. What the hospital supplies is a composite supply of medical treatment. It includes their medical treatment, doctor fees, medicines, etc., including stay charges, etc. Now, what government is doing is that they are going away with the concept of composite supply under the GST law. Since the room charges charged by the hospital is nothing but an integral part of the medical treatment, and medical treatment is exempt under India. What the government is now doing is that they are vivisecting this amount from the medical charges, medical bill, which is raised by the hospital, and accordingly, they are charging GST on this. So they are going against the very concept of composite supply, wherein this room rent, etc., forms part of my healthcare services. They will be vivisecting it separately and charging 5% GST on such room rents. Another important amendment is services provided by the cord blood banks by way of preservation of stem cells. It has been done away with. So all your companies involved in preservation of stem cells, they will not enjoy the GST exemption, and GST will be applicable at the rate of 18% on such services. Coming to the amendments related to the refunds. One of the most welcome amendment is the clarification that the Supreme Court decision, which relates to extension of timelines from 1st March 2020 till 28th February 2022, will be applicable for refund application also. So the Supreme Court in its order had earlier in 2020 and again in 2021, 22, etc., they have at that time gave an order that this period from 15/3/2020 till 28/02/2022, this entire 2 years period will be excluded for the purpose of limitation under any general or special laws in respect of all judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings. The confusion was that whether this decision will be applicable also in respect of refund application. For example, April 2019, I have to apply a refund for April 2019. I have to make an application within 2 years, that is March 2021, timeline gone. But if the Supreme Court decision is applicable, then this period from March 2020 till February 2022 will be excluded, and I can still make a refund application for April 2019. So that was the dispute which was going in the industry. Department at ground level was denying the benefit of this Supreme Court order. However, we had 3 High Court orders. There were 3 High Court orders which said that this Supreme Court order will also apply for refund application. And now with this clarification, the dispute will end at all level. And it's a very welcome clarification. Friends, please see at whether if you are a taxpayer or you are a professional, if any of your client is eligible to avail refunds related to 2019, 2018 late part, etc., you can still apply it. So it's a very welcome amendment. Another important change is in the formula used for calculation of refund of accumulated ITC on account of inverted duty structure. Friends, as we recall, there was a big dispute related to whether I can claim refund only of inputs in case of inverted duty structure or also of input services. The Supreme Court in the case of VKC Footsteps have clarified that at best, the refund can be claimed is only of inputs and not input services. When we see the refund formula, the formula which we under Rule 89 is given, when we apply that formula for claiming the refund amount, the formula is that I have to take the total credit into turnover of inverted duty structure product upon total turnover. And then I have to deduct the tax which I have paid on inverted duty structure items. Now, what the government has proposed in this council meeting is that As Supreme Court has already held, the refund of input service will not be available. Still, it will not be available. You cannot claim. It's not an amendment which is allowing you to claim refund of input services. It is not that amendment. This amendment is only limited to the point that while calculating the refund amount under that particular formula, you have to deduct the tax or which you have paid on inverted duty structure item, the output tax which you have paid on inverted duty structure item. Since you must have paid that tax using your input credit as well as input service credit. Since you must have paid that output tax using your input credit as well as input service credit, you need to bifurcate the same basis the input and input services credit availment and deduct only to the extent you have paid using input credit. So that's a welcome amendment in the formula. I repeat, they have not allowed refund of input service credit. They are only recommending the formula that what they have proposed is a change in the formula for calculation of refund under Rule 89.5 to take into account utilization of ITC on account of inputs and input services for payment of output tax on inverted rate supplied in the same ratio in which ITC has been availed on inputs and input services during the said period. Moving on to the next set of amendment. It's a very important amendment with regard to the recredit of ITC after recovery of refund. This is replicable in respect of Rule 9610. Friends, one of the greatest dispute in GST law was that certain manufacturers, etc., who were availing advance authorization benefit and other benefits, wherein they were procuring the inputs duty-free without payment of GST. They were barred from exporting the goods on payment of tax and claiming refund. Why? If I'm exporting the goods and claiming refund of GST, I export the goods on payment of GST and claim refund. Then the GST which I pay on export on output, I pay that GST using my old credit, and eventually I am able to get my old credit encashed. So there was a specific bar which they had imposed that you cannot claim refund if you are operating under advance authorization route and other routes, etc. Now, the problem which the industry was facing was that DRI and DGCI, they all have issued notices that any person who has claimed refund on payment of tax and claim refund of that, if he has opted for advance authorization route, etc., then he need to pay back the refund amount. So they were demanding the refund amount along with interest and penalty, and the taxpayers paid that amount. But the problem they were facing was how to claim back that credit which they had utilized for payment of this refund amount, for which now they have introduced Form PMT 03A. It's a very welcome amendment. They have introduced Form PMT 03A, and this amendment will be applicable for all those manufacturers who are facing issue with regard to Rule 9610. Apart from that, there have been various rate rationalization to remove inverted duty structure. Rates have increased from like solar water heater system from 5% to 12% and not drilling it down into each of the rates, etc. Another welcome recommendation is the supplies from duty-free shops. They have said that the supplies from duty-free shops at international terminal to outgoing international passengers are to be treated as export by duty-free shops and consequential refund benefit to be available to them on such supplies. Friends, the biggest issue which was being faced by these duty shop owners was that when they were selling to the international passengers, was it an export? Because I was giving the delivery of the goods at that moment itself. So whether it will qualify under the definition of export or not was a matter of dispute. Now they have very well clarified that all these duty-free shops owner, when they are supplying to international terminal, at international terminal to outgoing passengers, the said transaction will be treated as an export transaction, and accordingly refund will be available. So it's a very welcome amendment for the duty-free shop owners. So moving on to the amendments related to the compliances. One of the most talked about amendment is the proposal to suggest changes in Form GSTR 3B. What government has proposed is that in order to comprehensively change the Form 3B and resolve various issues faced by the stakeholders, GST Council proposed to take inputs, suggestions of the stakeholder by placing this proposal in public domain. So they have just proposed in public domain, and they will take our views, the views of the taxpayers, the views of the professional on the changes in Form 3B. Let's see how it drills down, but at least it is good to see that they are open to the changes in 3B and the amendments in Form GSTR 3B. Another very welcome amendment is in respect of ITC reversal on sale of duty credit scripts. Friends, if you see, there are various scripts, road tax scripts, MEIS scripts, SEI scripts, which are available to the exporters. Exporter can always sell these scripts in the market. Whenever they are selling these scripts in the market, it is treated as an exempt supply. No GST is leviable. The issue which used to come was the ITC reversal on the common inputs which I had taken. For example, audit services. It's common to the entire organization. When I'm selling my script, statutory audit fees, normal GST consultation fees, my head office rentals, etc. All these common services reversal were required. Now they have proposed to amend Rule 43 of the CGST rules to specifically exclude the sale of duty credit scripts from exempted supply for the purpose of reversal of common ITC. So it's a very welcome amendment. Henceforth, we are not required to reverse this credit of common ITC in respect of sale of duty-free scripts. But it seems that this amendment will be brought prospectively. What about retrospective impact? What if I have not done the reversal in the previous year? There we have to fight the matter, and the only interpretation which you can use is that this amendment is nothing but in the nature of clarification. You have to apply the principle of doctrine of fairness to argue that the intention of government was never to treat this transaction as an exempt supply, because I earn these scripts as a result of my export, and when I sell this script, the money is again used in my business only. So effectively, I'm using the entire money in my business only, and there should not be any ITC reversal requirement. And this was the intent of the government from perception. It's only that they have brought the amendment now. So we have to argue that this has to be applied retrospectively. Otherwise, it is prospective as per press release. Friends, coming to the other amendments, and one of the most harsh amendment proposed in this council meet is the extension of time limit for issuing demand orders for the financial year 17-18. The time limit has been increased for issuing the show cause notice for the financial year 17-18 is till 30th June 2023, and accordingly the demand order has to be passed by 30th of September 2023. These time limits were expiring in 2022, and now they have increased it till 2023. Friends, to my mind, even if we have made the mistake in GST in 17-18, GST was a new law. Everybody was understanding it. Government itself was understanding it. So there can be a genuine mistake which I had made. Now you want to recover the money pursuant to that genuine mistake which I have made, for which you are increasing the time limit. Is it justified? When the law had already provided a time limit of 5 years, which again is a very big time limit, and which was expiring in 2022, and now you are increasing that particular time limit for recovering the amount which I must have got, which must have got unpaid due to genuine mistakes, etc. in 17-18. To my mind, it's not a taxpayer friendly amendment. It's a purely pro-revenue amendment which has been introduced by the government, and these kinds of amendment must be avoided to avoid litigation in GST. Another important clarifications issued by what the press release has clarified is that there are various issues on which they will be issuing detailed clarifications. So they have said that they will be issuing clarification related to fake invoicing. Today, what happens? A gives fake invoice to B, B gives fake invoice to C, C to D. It's the same transaction across 4 chain, A to B, B to C, C to D. There is a tax evasion of 100 rupees. Now, what the government is doing, they are demanding tax from A also, B also, C also, D also. So effectively, 4 people are involved. 400 rupees tax is demanded, 400 rupees penalty is demanded, and interest is demanded from all the 4 players. Whereas it's a single transaction which has escaped the taxability. So government, we await the clarification of the government. How will they clarify that in such manner where multiple chains are involved, A, B, C, D, E, F, how the tax demand will be raised by the officers, how show cause notice will be raised. we expect clarity from the government in nearby time. They will be issuing a circular on this issue. Government will also be issuing circular on interpretation of section 17(5) blot credits, and also a clarification on the issue of perquisites provided by the employer to the employees, whether there is any taxability on this. These is a very welcome steps. Friends, we are aware all these are interpretational issues, and a settled clarification by the government will be beneficial to avoid any litigation. Another important measure is the facility to transfer balance in electronic cash ledgers of distinct person. So earlier in Finance Act 2022, they had proposed that if I have a CGST and IGST balance in Delhi cash ledger, I want to transfer it to Karnataka CGST and IGST cash ledger balance, it can be done, but the facility was not there. Now they will be implementing this facility at the earliest. Please note, what I can transfer is only the CGST and the IGST balance. That is CGST balance in Delhi or IGST balance in Delhi to Karnataka. I cannot transfer the SGST balance, but there is an indirect way of transferring the IGST balance. How? What you can do is that in Delhi, since you have an SGST cash ledger balance, you can transfer that SGST cash balance to your daily CGST cash balance only. So within Delhi only, you can transfer from SGST to CGST, and then using this facility, you can transfer CGST Delhi to CGST Karnataka. So that is something which is practically possible. Apart from that, they have proposed various other rate change, etc. In tourism sector, for hotel accommodation, wherein the room tariff was up to 1,000 rupees per day, they have imposed a tax of 12%. So hotels no more enjoy the exemption. If the room tariff is less than rupees 1,000 per day also, then also there will be a GST liability of 12%. Another important amendment is related to the constitution of GST Tribunal. The GST Council has decided to constitute a group of ministers to address various concerns raised by the states in relation to constitution of GST Tribunal and make recommendations for appropriate amendments in the CGST Act. We hope that the tribunals will accordingly be constituted at the earliest, which is much required. In the end, there are various rate changes related in the health sector, FMCG sector, energy sectors. One of the important change, cut and polished diamonds. The rate has increased from 0.25 to 1.5%. A major change in the rate of cut and polished diamonds. All these rate changes will be applicable from 18th of July. With this, we end our presentation. We broadly have covered various changes brought by the 47th council meeting. We await the exact notification and circulars which will be issued by the authorities in due time, and thereafter we will discuss the detailed implication on this. With this, I end my presentation. I will be taking the question and answer in the end. Over to you, Nikita.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful presentation indeed. We wanted to know the council's updates, the decisions which have been taken and recommendations given by the council. So it was a very good session and informative also. Now I am welcoming Advocate Sudipta Bhattacharjee, sir, for taking up the next part of the session. So, I am welcoming you on the behalf of Webtel and AFTP. So, let us start with your session.
Sure.
Okay.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible. Your screen is visible.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nikita. Tushar, excellent session as usual. Very good afternoon to all of you. I'm going to talk about search and seizure under GST and some of the key points. And the idea is, search and seizure is not new under GST law. It's not something specific that has come under GST law. It has been there under customs. It has been there under income tax. There are, many of you would have seen really thick commentaries just dealing with search and seizure. So I think the first point to remember vis-a-vis GST, search and seizure vis-a-vis GST is there is a wealth of jurisprudence that has developed over the last 70 plus years, and there is no reason why we should not learn from it, should not borrow it. The connected point I wanted to make at the outset is, because there is so much jurisprudence, of course, in a 25-30 minute, I would not be able to cover the entire spectrum of it. What I'm targeting to do today is to give you some key pointers, some key tools, key weapons, so that we can use them when the situation so demands. We don't need to necessarily use them in every case of search and seizure, but it's good to know about them so that as a strategic option, it is available. Bear in mind, and this is a larger point that I'm making, search and seizure typically happens at a very early stage of an investigation, of a matter, of a dispute, right? Think about the contrasting perspectives. What is it that the department is trying to establish by a search and seizure? They not only want to say that, establish that there has been an evasion, there has been a violation in terms of the positions, the provisions of the tax law. They also want to establish that you are a malicious actor, you had intent to evade, your conduct has been questionable, etc. From the assessee side, or as an advisor to an assessee, what is it that we are trying to prove? Of course, that on merits we are good, but also that every aspect of the investigation is flawed. We want to create doubts on the narrative of the department. We want to be in a position to challenge every factual aspect of the department. And it is with this larger objective that we need to understand some of the tools, some of the strategies that I'm going to talk about. So let's begin with the source of law. We know section 67 of the CGST Act, read with 139 to 141 of the CGST rules, is what covers search and seizure. 6710 is of particular relevance because it borrows the provisions of Code of Criminal Procedure, CRPC, into the context of search and seizure under GST. And what does it do? There are multiple safeguards that have evolved over the years under CRPC. It helps us borrow those safeguards even in the context of GST. The most important of them being getting a copy of the reasons to believe. What is the reasons to believe? As you know, search and seizure is something that really inconveniences us, that really sort of affects our fundamental rights. So there are some statutory safeguards, namely that a senior officer, a proper officer, has reason to believe that there has been a violation or there are some materials that are secreted, and he or she authorizes that particular search. It is those reasons to believe, the copy of those reasons to believe, which can be sought free of cost as per section 165 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, 165(5), and the same thing is borrowed under GST. So the first strategy or the first tool that I want to talk about is this. The moment there is a search or there has been a search, let's start off by asking what was the reason underlying that particular search. Two things can happen. When you write a letter quoting 6710 read with 165(5) of CRPC, the investigating authority may not even respond, or they may respond saying that your interpretation is wrong and we are not going to give you, or we are not liable to give you the reasoning. I have had the second experience very recently. What it helps us do next is we can approach a high court saying that this is erroneous and this ought to be given. Why do we go to high court? If the heat has become too much to handle, if the follow-up to search and seizure has become too aggressive, there is too much pressure in terms of collection of taxes, etc., having a high court's involvement, even though not necessarily on a specific point, but only on a technical point like this, pushes them back, buys you some time, buys you some breathing space. So this is one of the things that one can utilize as a strategy. This is a clear statutory right that is available if we read CRPC and 6710 conjointly. Moving on, 67.2, as I said, there are search provisions under Customs Act, and 67 is pari materia with Customs Act 105, and to that extent the jurisprudence is borrowable. Now, one of the things that 67.2 talks about is goods liable to confiscation, and that includes documents, books, or things. Now, of course, things is a word of wide import. All of us understand that, and it would include IT gadgets, electronic gadgets, phones, laptops, iPads, etc. Do I have a right now? Because search and seizure need not necessarily only happen in an office. It can happen at my residence also, right? Do I have a right to refuse to give my password of my personal laptop, personal iPad, personal phone to the investigating team? To answer this, there are two questions, two concepts under Constitution of India that we need to know about. The first one is a right against self-incrimination. It is flowing from Article 20 of the Indian Constitution. What it means is no one can force me to be a witness against myself. So when I am forced to give the password, and if my phone contains incriminating material, the argument is that you are forcing me, the state is forcing me to be a witness against myself. The second right or the constitutional concept is a right to privacy. I think we all understand what right to privacy is. What has happened is, let's go one by one. The self-incrimination point has been argued earlier, not in the specific context of password, but in the context of handwriting sample, voice sample, blood sample, etc., where people have taken a similar argument that this violates my right of self-incrimination. But high courts, to be honest, have not accepted those. Even in the context of right of privacy, there has been one judgment only so far, to the best of my knowledge, from Karnataka, which also they did not accept this argument. Then why am I mentioning these two arguments? Because most of these are highly interpretative legal issues, and till there is a clear Supreme Court judgment on this, it cannot be said that the last word has been spoken. So these are valid legal arguments. There is a fair amount of constitutional jurisprudence from other countries which we can refer, and we have seen many instances where the Indian Supreme Court has relied upon foreign jurisprudence in terms of constitutional interpretation. So there is no saying where the ball will stop rolling. So if we want to, as a matter of strategy, buy time, push back, sort of give a statement of intent to the investigating team that we are not going to take this lying down, these are some of the options, or these are some of the legal arguments that are available: right of self-incrimination and right of privacy when it comes to giving of password of seized assets. I'll come to collection of amounts a little later. Let's talk about a connected point: evidentiary value of seized assets. Now, this is one of the most often ignored aspect in an investigation that I see. Once the assets have been seized, I often see people really don't bother what happens thereafter. Has the data been extracted properly? Have the due process of law been followed, etc.? These grounds are often not taken in a show cause notice, and that is a big deficiency. That is something that we must not forget to do. See, the evidentiary value of seized IT asset is governed by Section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act. There is a certification procedure. There are a lot of procedural aspects that need to be adhered to before a seized IT asset can be accepted as evidence against me, against a particular assessee. So we need to really ensure, when we are helping a assessee, representing an assessee, that those steps have been fulfilled. I'll just give you a live example. There is a matter that I'm currently doing where 17 IT devices, iPads and phones and personal laptops have been seized. We spent almost about 15 to 20 days for the forensic extraction process. The forensic extraction from all of these documents or all of these gadgets happened in the presence of one of our lawyers, independent witness. So, and the proper Panchnama and documentation was done, and the device was sealed thereafter, so that there can be no iota of doubt vis-a-vis the evidentiary value. And why did this is a sensitive matter? So, the highest standards of process, due process was followed. It's not necessary that in every case of search and seizure, this would be followed. And that is where we need to be hawk-eyed in terms of finding out weaknesses. Now, coming to collection of amounts during search. We know this is a malady that's there everywhere. A lot of judgments have come in. This has been an issue that has been highlighted to the CBIC again and again. They did come up with an instruction sometime late May. The point remains that when we are faced with that live situation, we may not be able to resist that pressure then and there. We might be forced to, and we have seen that again and again happening. We might be forced to deposit money by way of, by saying that this is under voluntary, this is not under coercion, etc. And, it is by my own self-ascertainment that I'm doing blah, blah, blah. it does not stop us from filing a letter of protest thereafter. If we are afraid that if we file a letter of protest with the same authority that has investigated me, there may be repercussions, we can write to the principal commissioner of the jurisdiction or even to the CBIC. But let's have that letter of protest emailed or filed at the very earliest. If we don't want to file it with the investigating team, file it with someone else, file it with the superior authority, but do file it. And this is a point, I had the privilege of interacting with the honorable member GST of CBIC, Mr. Nagendra sir. And, I was discussing this and he said, what stopped your client from emailing me, emailing my office, emailing CBIC? Record the protest. And then, action can be taken. And that's a very important point to my mind to remember vis-a-vis collection. Yes, the circular, the instruction that has come in May should help, but it does not go as far as it should have gone. It says something that is already there, so I don't know how far it will stop this malaise, but if it does not, what I said, that's a strategy, that's something that one can do. Now, coming to the reason to believe part of it, there is a huge amount of jurisprudence on what constitutes reason to believe. It is something more than reason to suspect. I think that's a sort of first point to remember. Just because I suspect something does not work. I have to have something more substantive, something more tangible to say that, yes, I do believe there is something wrong, there is something that is relevant to my proceedings, etc. And GST law specifically, unfortunately, does not specifically say that you must record the reasons for service belief, unlike CRPC or Income Tax Act. But through judicial precedents, through High Court based precedents, one can interpret, one can read into the same, even in the context of GST. Another point to remember is the reasonable belief has to be very specific. We have to know that, or the officer or the investigating team has to know that, okay, this is what we are looking for. This is the broad nature of documents or files or whatever information that you are looking for as an outcome of this search. It can't be a roving or a fishing inquiry. It can't be a case that, let's go there, we'll see what comes out or what emerges from that search. That's not allowed. That's not acceptable. And reason to believe judicial review of that is very much possible. And which is where I go back to the point about asking a copy of the materials that form the basis for reasons to believe. And I go back to that original point of why is it important? Because what is it that you're trying to prove when you're in an investigation? You're trying to challenge the narrative painted by the department. We're trying to say that the investigation is biased or the investigation is not fair. It has not adhered to procedure. It is trying to pin the blame on me for something that I have not done. And for that, you need to challenge the credibility of that investigation. And this is one way, one of the ways to do that. Let's now talk about the doctrine of fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. What does it mean? See, in USA, in the US constitutional law, there is a clear provision that if a search is illegal, if a search is held to be illegal, any evidence collected from that search is inadmissible automatically. Which is why, I mean, some of you who would see Hollywood movies or series or read John Grisham books, there is a lot of emphasis and there is a lot of plot points on illegal search. And that's the reason, because the moment you prove the search is illegal, the evidence goes out of the window. Unfortunately, in India, that is not the case. Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine was specifically not accepted by the Indian Supreme Court in this particular case that you see on the slide. Puranmal versus Director of Inspection, New Delhi. This is a 1974 case. So the position currently in India is, it is upon the court to decide whether or not, we can raise the point that the search was illegal, there was problems with the search, and then the court will decide whether or not to admit. I made a lot of points about IT assets and admissibility of IT assets, etc. There is a recent case, not in the context of GST, but in the context of customs, where they found what I thought was clear evidence of fudging the prices, etc. But on the ground that the IT gadgets were not submitted, or the evidence was not extracted by following the right procedure as prescribed under Indian Evidence Act, these were not accepted, or the court rejected that entire evidence. There was a lot of WhatsApp evidence also, copy of WhatsApp chats, which were also rejected by the court as inadmissible evidence, and on that basis the taxpayer was free, let go. The point that I'm trying to to come back to, vis-a-vis fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, in India, the reason why Puranmal's case refused to accept the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, they specifically say that in India, right of privacy is not a fundamental right. In American Constitution, right to privacy was already acknowledged in 1970s as a fundamental right. That was not the case with India. Now, of course, as all of us know, about 3-4 years back, in the case of Puttaswamy, a 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court has unanimously held that right to privacy is a fundamental right, and there is no more doubt vis-a-vis that aspect. Which brings us back to the point: is it now time to reconsider the judgment in Puranmal? Is it possible now to seek compensation for illegal searches against against us? The idea is not to pick a fight, but the idea is to push back strategically if needed, and some of these arguments can come in really handy. I mentioned a while back that vis-a-vis password of seized IT gadgets, IT assets, right to privacy is an argument that needs to be explored. It needs to be explored not only vis-a-vis that specific aspect, it needs to be explored for overall search and seizure per se. So the moment a search and seizure, there are illegalities in the search and seizure, if nothing else, it violates right to privacy, and to that extent, maybe the entire thing can be thrown out, the entire case against me can be thrown out. One, I think, a case law that I wanted to mention before I end my session, the Delhi High Court, and there are multiple such judgments. As you know, the proper officer at a joint commissioner level is someone who is authorized to issue the warrant, the search warrant, or the search authorization. So anyone else issuing that, someone lower than that issuing that, is not kosher, is not something that would be valid. Secondly, and this is a case where there's a larger investigation. The Delhi Commissionerate asked the Noida Commissionerate to look into a particular SSE, and the Noida Commissionerate issued a reason to say that I have reason to believe, and issued a search warrant. Sorry, it was the other way. The Delhi Commissionerate said that I received a request from Noida to check this out, check this SSE out, and I felt that is that is enough reason to believe, and a search warrant was issued, which was not accepted by the Delhi High Court. They said that what is to the officer in Delhi, that what is your independent basis for reaching that conclusion, that there is reason to believe? Just because another officer in Noida has said that go and check this place out, or we believe there is something there, we believe there is something hidden there, doesn't constitute reason to believe, because it has to be your reason to believe. What the officer from Noida has said is his reason to believe. Where is your independent analysis of that? Now, and on that ground, this particular search was quashed. There was a sort of that shop was sealed, that sealing was removed, and all of that. So the point that I'm trying to make is, search and seizure, as stressful as it is for us SSEs, I call it a legal minefield for the department as well, because they can trip up on multiple aspects. There are many clear guidelines that they need to follow, and failure to follow those gives us right to approach the court, right to push them back, and we need to be cognizant, we need to be proactive in dealing with those. There are multiple circulars already. The CBIC FAQ is in place. There is there are a lot of safeguards that are prescribed by CBIC by guidelines of 2nd February 2021. I think all of those need to be in place. And as a company or as an advisor to company, I think one of the things that I see missing often is a clear protocol. That what happens if a search party reaches my office? Who deals with that? What are the 5 things we should check? What is the business continuity plan if they take away my server, if they take away my laptop, if they take away, what documents, etc.? Is there a business continuity plan? It is very important to have some of these in place. Like Tushar was mentioning, many of the things, many of the recommendations that have come in the last GST Council meeting, clearly there is an intent. There is a pressure to collect more revenue, and as that pressure goes up, as the economy and the fiscal deficit numbers grow, there will be more and more such search and seizures. And to that extent, I think all of us need to be aware of the rights under law, so that we can protect, or we can stand up to any abuse of law in the garb of search and seizure. With that, I will happy to take questions if any.
Sir, Sudipta sir will be taking questions at the end after, okay. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So we can move on to the next.
So now I welcome Mr. Kapil sir to continue on the next session on the judgments. Kapil sir.
Hi Vikata, am I audible?
Yes sir. Yes sir, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity that you've given me to connect to people, and then probably take a few highlights with respect to what recently has been decided by Supreme Court in 2 landmark cases. One with respect to the secondment, and the other respect to the ocean freight void mineral. So in the course of presentation, I'll be discussing these 2 major cases, and then probably see your involvement with respect to any issue that you want us to highlight, or any issue that you want us to elaborate more. We'll be happy to come back to you on that point. With this, I'll just try to proceed forward and try and finish up in next 20 minutes, so other speakers can take up their time. So okay. The first decision that we're discussing is with respect to the secondment. Right? This is Northern Operating Systems Private Limited versus the revenue, which is the department. So the brief facts, as you may see on screen, relates to the secondment. There is a holding company outside India, and there is a subsidiary company in India, right? Obviously, with the subsidiary being the Indian company, it's a parent-child relationship. So the parent outside India definitely would render some support to the company in India, which is the child company. Now, this support with respect to the child company would essentially involve various activity on support side, that is to the IT systems and the other software and the vendor sheets and other details. And the major thing would be on the deputation front. So on the manpower support, primarily the holding company, in order to expand its business into the new region, that is the subsidiaries company's region, would send certain employees on deputation basis. Now, what is the deputation and secondment? They are more or less interchangeably used, but they have definitely some degree of finer details into them. But for the purpose of GST, they are ought to be understood in the same manner. Now, the secondment or deputation is a case wherein the main company gives the employee to the other company on a loan basis. Now, what is this loan basis? On a temporary period basis, the employee shifts his base from the main company and comes back to the new company. The new company takes over as an employer, and there may be certain period, certain specific project, or certain duration, as the case may be, depending upon the deputation or a secondment contract. It may be bound by terms of a time or a project or any other basis. After that, the person will go back to the main company. That is the first. Secondly, in order to continue the payroll and the retirement benefit, which is oftenly referred to as social security, the employee, which is the seconded employee, continues to be on the roll of the main company. That is the holding company from where he has come to the subsidiary company. Now, a typical arrangement for deputation would mean the subsidiary company will request the holding company will spare a resource will come back and sit in the subsidiary company. Subsidiary company has the power typically to ask for a replacement if the person who is deputed does not fit the profile, and after the termination or after the completion of the project or time basis, the employee goes back to the main employer. In terms of financial, how does it work? Financially, the seconded company, the subsidiary company, would pay the salary to the Indian part. Obviously, there will be some salary paid to the employee outside India as well, because he continues to be the employee of the holding company. So typically, social security plus some hardship allowance, etc., are being paid by the holding company to the employee, which are then sought as reimbursement from the Indian company, because those expenditures are incurred on the behalf of employee which has been sent on deputation. This is a generic factor. Though in practical life, there may be other equation as well, wherein there is no benefit paid outside India or the entire salary paid outside India. There can be all sorts of combination, but I am discussing more in the context of decision. Now the issue which arose is, obviously at lower level, which is still the High Court and the Division Bench Supreme Court, all things was favorable. This was read to be a service of employer-employee, and which is outside the purview of service tax. So therefore, no tax implication per se on secondment of employee, and whatever was reimbursed was said to be a part of salary cost reimbursed to the holding company, and therefore there was no service tax which was levied. Now the question came up before Supreme Court, and if we go on to the further slide, we'll find out as to why Supreme Court actually held this to be the primary service of deputation of manpower. There were four major factors which actually led to the Supreme Court coming back to the conclusion, and for obvious reason, there are certain degree of gap with respect to the position taken by Supreme Court. That's our view, but since Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the country, we are bound to follow the law of land which has been laid by Supreme Court. But essentially, as a person, as a lawyer, as an intellect, as a practicing person, you ought to have a different view with respect to certain position being taken by Supreme Court. So therefore, we will discuss as to how it could have been represented better or how it could have been interpreted better, perhaps, by the court while delivering the decision. So the essential question is, when the overseas group companies leaves the resource to the subsidiary company for its disposal and incur certain cost on that behalf, whether the activity of providing the company on the employee on the loan basis would tantamount or would mean to be a manpower deputation, and therefore covered by a manpower supply services, which is the subject service in the case, or not. This is a primary question. Now the court took the following point. It said, typically, in a case of deputation, you give the employee to the other party, and the other party has certain degree of control over it, and the company who has given the employee on loan ceases to exercise the control. Then they got back to this arrangement and observed that the instructions and the other governing parameters were still those of the parent company outside India. Therefore, the employee never came under your 100% control and supervision. That is the first point which they have hold out. Second point, they said, since the company has the power of asking for a replacement of resources if the employee is not fitting their bill in terms of the requirement, this is a more arrangement wherein a company or a service recipient is demanding a service provider as to a better resource for fulfillment of their services. So therefore, they said, this is not a case where an employee is going, you have the option of asking for alternate resource, which depicts there is a nature of service involved at the end of service recipient, which he is asking or which is seeking from the holding company. Third, they said that the employment continues with respect to the moment you cease him to be your employee, the moment you vacate or terminate his services at your end, it goes back to the original company and retains the employment, which means that only for a limited period which the resource has been loaned is the period when the employment has been transferred, which is a restrictive thing. Therefore, it cannot be said to be a case of an employee-employee relationship between the holding subsidiary company and the employee. The fourth thing says, since you are paying certain part of benefits to the other party, the certain part of benefit at the end of holding company was the social security and certain allowances such as hardship allowance, etc., which were paid. These were the financial payments which were made by the holding company to the employee, which were then sought as reimbursement. They said, since he is entitled to all those things, means you are having some kind of control and ownership with respect to the employee. Therefore, we cannot be regarded this to be an employee of the subsidiary company to where it has been loaned. These were the 4 key points which the court take. Obviously, there are certain other finer points also, but these were the 4 major parameters which the court observed while determining that the arrangement of secondment is not essentially meaning the employer-employee relationship between the subsidiary company and the employee. Therefore, the payment made as a reimbursement to the holding company will not be regarded as a payment towards salary cost. Therefore, we will ought to have been considered as to be a supply of services and hence taxable under reverse charge in the hand of recipient, so on and so forth. If we move on to the next question, the following points are actually the basic things. There are other decisions wherein with respect to the multiple other arrangements, I think those have not been considered or relied by Supreme Court. The earlier division bench of Supreme Court were non-reasoned order, especially in the case of Volkswagen and all. So they were merely not admitted and therefore the bench did not take cognizance of those decisions. But yes, there are other decisions wherein these kinds of arrangement has been elaborated, especially a point which I feel differentiate. The point is, when for the purpose of income tax, the global salary of the employee is being taxed in the hand of the recipient, how can you have a condition of saying that the employee continues to be the role of the original company, which is the holding company? That is the first point, which has not been very detailedly dealt in the present case. The second point, which I feel could have been represented better, is the fact that the employment goes back to the original owner does not mean that the employee has been given on loan. There are cases of concepts wherein joint employment, more than one company employment, these concepts have been recognized in various laws, including income tax, etc., wherein one employee can continue to remain an employee. One person can continue to remain employee of 2 employers also. Those kinds of concepts we find were actually missing when the decision were delivered. Perhaps it may have been argued, but decision does not deal with those aspects. In the evolving stages of economy, these concepts of an employee working for more than one employer are very common, especially with respect to startup, which definitely take the services of certain top level management on a loan basis or on a sharing basis. The test, according to me, is if for the duration when the company works, when the person works for a company, who retains the control, who retains the supervision, how is the reporting pattern working, who is doing the entire compliances on account of labor wherever they are applicable. If all these things are done by subsidiary, then perhaps regarding this to be as a concept of supply and not the case of employment seems to be misplaced somewhere with respect to the decision. And that's where I feel most of the companies are coming back to us and asking us to analyze if this could have been differently done, or is there a way in GST that you can read differently with respect to this concept and come out with a different view on this case. If we move further, we'll find out certain interesting points which needs to be then taken care. One, this decision is rendered in the context of service tax. Obviously, question that comes up is what happens to the period of GST from 1/7/2017? Will this ipso facto apply to the period or not? That's the common question that comes to us. The second question that comes to us is, does this apply to the service tax period, which it does, and then it plays on the law of land? Are we covered under the decision to pay tax for the period which is prior to 1/7/2017, because law of limitation has primarily taken care of the earlier period because of the 5-year period under 73 provision? Will it apply there? The third major point is what I feel is the biggest disconnect. The bigger disconnect is, if you may recollect, the salary and TDS under the Income Tax Act is done under 192. The compliance is done by the subsidiary company will be under 192. And the deduction, which is on a global salary, will also be done on 192. Now, if you disregard to be a service wherein the seconded employee is considered to be the employer of the holding company and given to India on loan basis, and this act itself is regarded as service. Two questions that I want to have a dialogue. The first is whether it creates a service fee in India or not, because the company, which is the holding company, is having an economic presence in India by way of the employee working in India under a deputation. So that creates a whole lot of problem in income tax, whether this will constitute to be a fee and therefore certain part of income needs to be attributed to India. That is one major thing which I feel is going to come up certainly on this aspect. The second is the TDS. Obviously, we are done on 192 with respect to the company. The question may come up whether this was supposed to be under FIS or under FTS, which is fee for technical services, wherein we need to see the DTA AA and the other regulations. So that issue also from the income standpoint remains open. My take before I move on to the second part is, yes, the ratio of Supreme Court is absolutely clear now. It says the person who is coming on deputation will be seen as act of providing manpower supply or manpower fulfillment services. The moment it says, the reverse charge automatically kicks in. The decision applies from 1/7/2017 already. The question which needs to be factored are, how do we treat the past? Do we pay up now or do we wait for department to take an action? Because of late, I have been approached by a couple of people wherein the department have started asking details with respect to seconded employees. Because the question that needs to be done is, if I pay suo moto, I still have a chance of taking credit under reverse charge. Whereas if I pay under inquiry and thereafter, after pursuance to an inquiry, there may be a dispute with respect to availment of credit also. So these are the questions which I thought need to be addressed from the perspective of how this decision needs to be looked into and what are the ramifications. With this, we'll go on to the second aspect, and then probably if time permits towards the end, we will be able to take up few questions which are relating to it. So if you may flip slide, you will find out the interesting questions, and I think I have factored those questions which you may like to come. Next, can we move on to the second decision? Further. All these things have been dealt with, no problem. This also has been dealt with, direct tax. This also has been dealt with. Yes, this is the second part which I thought we will take in greater depth, and then we will move on to the balance part. So again, very vanilla facts. The company is importer of coal. They do certain import of coal on CIF basis. CIF is cost insurance case included in the price of good itself, which is the coal. This is an Incoterm which are used to good or import goods into India or export goods out of India. So CIF means the cost insurance and freight with respect to the goods has already been factored by the seller who is based out in India, who is the exporter. The goods are coming to India on landed basis. So when the goods and the shipment come on a CIF basis, the importer, who is importer on records, offer the amount to the custom duty, which is inclusive of CIF. So indirectly, the value for the custom purposes is inclusive of the freight which is incurred. The arrangement with respect to freight is entered by the exporter, which is based outside India, who engages the foreign shipping lines outside India for a certain amount to be transferred to them on account of freight, for which the freight forwarder takes the freight delivery on a CIA basis from a port of discharge to from port of loading to port of discharge. The question that came up was, there was a notification which said that with respect to the imports of goods into India, wherein the goods are coming by way of freight or transportation of goods in a vessel from a place outside India to a custom frontier in India, there was a levy which was imposed on reverse charge basis at the rate of 5% on such activity of transportation. That is the first part. The second part to this, which is a legal point, is on the same part, the notification was introduced with respect to who is the person liable for making the payment of IGST under reverse charge. It is very important. The notification actually deems the importer of goods as a person liable for making payment of IGST on the ocean freight, which is a subject matter of goods imported into India. So these were the two metrics. The question came up that when the value of goods for the purpose of custom duty is including the freight component, then how on the same component, when you are charging the custom duty, which is then on top of it after BCD, you impose IGST also. The first IGST is suffered as a goods, and by this notification, you are now seeking to double tax the freight component as a service, deeming as a service in the hands of importer, and therefore trying to levy tax. So this essentially means you are trying to tax the same element 2 times, which is leading to a double taxation, therefore leading to a challenge before the Gujarat High Court, who then struck down this entry and said this can't be done and this is ultra virus. This will lead to a certain degree of double taxation. Now, this is the factual metric which went before Supreme Court. Now, the observation, if you move further to the next slide, we'll find out the ratio, what the court has said. So these are the issues that we have framed, whether the ratio was, I think if you move to further slide, we'll find out the question. The recommendations were whether the announcement given by GST Council is binding or not, which is then now relevant what Tushar just spoke a while back with respect to 47 GST Council minutes. They have given certain observations, whether those observations are binding or they are recommendatory, to which court said they are recommendatory. If you may go to the further previous slide, please. Previous slide, sorry, you're going back. Yes. Previous, you are moving further. आप पीछे जाइए थोड़ा सा. 2 more. 1 more. Thank you. So this is for the first was what are the recommendations, whether they are binding or they are recommendatory, to which court said the recommendation by GST Council are not law itself. They are merely recommendation. They are not incorporated in law as they are given by GST Council. There has to be a process by which they have to be borrowed in the legislation. So that's the first observation. The second question which was asked was whether the notification which introduced and said that the person liable to making freight with respect to the ocean freight in respect of vessel would be the importer, whether this was extension or this was delegated legislation extension, wherein the notification went beyond the main section itself, then which actually imposed the liability on the other party, whether this was the excessive delegation of legislative powers or not. This was the second question asked, to which court said, since the notification only fixes the liability on the importer and he was the beneficiary of the services, therefore we are not able to see any excessive delegation of any power given to the officer under which they have exercised this power of putting RCM on the ocean freight. The third thing was whether the importer per se, who does not have any contract of privity with respect to the ocean freight, because if you recollect, the vessel is engaged by the exporter at the port of loading. The freight settlement, invoicing, payment thereof happen between 2 persons, namely the freight forwarder and the exporter outside India. In this matrix, can it be a contractually possible that by way of a deeming fiction, you deemed the importer who is making import into India as a person liable to making freight, as a person who is receiving the services by way of deeming fiction? So this deeming fiction actually goes beyond the contract of privity or contract of services, wherein the original contract is between the freight forwarder and the exporter outside India. So court said, since 13 deals with the place of supply, and they deal the place of supply as where the termination or where the port of discharge is. Therefore, we will deem the services to be provided in India, and since the importer is the beneficiary of those services, therefore, read with this notification, we will deem this to be a services provided in India and received by the importer. Therefore, we don't see any problem in that. Now, what I see, perhaps, if you move further, there are two fallacies which are able to see. There are two apparent points which I'm able to see has been misconstrued. The first point is Section 13 of IGST is only fixing, CGST is only fixing the context of where the place of supply is. So these are a set of rules which were earlier called POPS. Now they are again in this also POPS. They now deal with a case wherein the services are deemed to have been provided in a particular location, because services are perhaps an intangible matter. There may be differentiation or there may be difficulty in finding out where the services are provided. Therefore, there are artificial rules which are framed to determine where the services are provided. Now, these artificial rules are merely rules which are framed to determine for the taxing purpose where services are provided. These artificial rule never fixes the recipient of services. This is the first point, wherein court, when you read the decision, now trying to fix a liability since the services are said to be provided in India and received by the importer. Therefore, the importer will consider to be the recipient of services, which according to me is not the case. Secondly, if you read Section 5.3, which empowers the government to make the rule, it only shifts the liability from a provider to a person, a recipient, or any other person. Now, by way of Section 5.3, it is administrative convenience where the point of collection of tax has been shifted from one person to the other person. Section 5 nowhere deems or put any power or gives or provides any power in the hands of central government to determine who the recipient of services will be. Essentially, it is point of fixing the responsibility of who is person supposed to pay tax, pursuant to which the notification 10 of 2017 has been issued. I'd like to pause here. I'll just like to take you back to the Service Tax Rule 1994. Now, this law came in 1994, everybody is aware. With respect to the Service Rule 1994, there was a specific provision 21D, Rule 21D. Now, 21D incorporates various persons who were liable to pay tax in respect of certain specified services. This notification 10 of 2017 exact parameter of 21D. It is only fixing the person. It is only identifying the person who is supposed to pay tax. It never creates a fiction by which you are deeming the services to be received by a particular party. No, that's not the case. I mean, this is the fine difference which I'm trying to highlight to you, that merely fixing a place of supply at a particular place or identifying a person who is supposed to pay tax, these two factors does not give right to come back to a irrefutable presumption that the services are deemed to have been provided in India and has been received by the importer in India. I think these are the 2 points where I think court has actually gone a bit wrong, which eventually will create problem not in context of this, but in context of some other decision or in some other interpretation when the liability will be taken up by department. Perhaps the good thing that I want to tell, the court has then gone back into the concept of composite supply and said, since freight is integral part of the goods that are coming into India and the price is embedded on a CIA basis, we can't split a value of composite supply and offer the freight component to the service as a service in India. Therefore, they will continue to tax as a good. Therefore, this notification does not apply in context of CIF imports, wherein freight component can be taxed in the hand of importer. So decision has gone favorable, but I think the observation are bit misconstrued somewhere, which I feel may lead to certain degree of interpretation given otherwise by department seeking to extract certain revenue, considering what Sudipta and Tushar mentioned, that all these measures in 47, read with all the search and search proceedings, are now inching towards the fact that they are trying to extract more revenue in terms of wherever there are leakages. and perhaps that is going to increase in many folds. So we just need to see how far we apply this. If we go on to the conclusion on this part before I hang up, the decision is favorable. However, the two interpretation of fixing a person to pay tax and place where services are provided are actually misfelt. They have gone beyond the contract of law, which says the recipient and the relationship between the two contracting party are provider and receiver. They have taken a beneficiary of services as a recipient of services, which according to me is incorrect. If you apply a concept of beneficiary, you have problem in outdoor catering services. You have problem in any services where the amount is borne by one company and enjoyed by the other company. Example, outdoor catering is a primary example where the corporate pay for the meal, but the meal are actually enjoyed by the employee. So the beneficial enjoyment is with the other party, whereas the payment is made by the other party. This decision is now giving window to department to go beyond the contractual recipient and go back to other person who is a beneficial interest or who is having a beneficial enjoyment of services and identify and cast liability on that. This is where I feel this misconstruction may come back and create some kind of ruckus or extravagant litigation going back in this path. These were the two major path-breaking decisions which I thought happened in the past. I like to take a pause here, go back to the other session, and then probably towards the end, if you have any issue, we'll definitely come back and try and address those points.
Thank you so much, sir, for this session. I think these two judgments are really very important, and especially this Mohit Minerals Private Limited. It is a recent judgment, and like there has been a lot of discussion on this particular judgment. And so you taking up this particular case, I think and explaining it in such a good manner will help the participants understand about this judgment in a very good way. Thank you so much, sir. So we'll be taking the questions at the end. And yes, sir. So now I welcome CA Rohini Aggarwal ji to have a discussion on recent High Court rulings. Some important High Court rulings she'll be sharing with us, and then after that we'll be taking questions from our participants. Ma'am, Rohini ma'am.
Is my PPT visible?
Yes, your PPT is visible, ma'am.
Just a minute, I think this. This is okay now?
Yes, it is audible.
It is audible. So I'll start again. Actually, my warm regards to all my participants, all my co-panelists. I was actually listening all the deliberations, and it's really wonderful and always adds to knowledge to listen to this brilliant deliberations. Thank you so much. And I think this subject is like this, GST and the judgments and the everyday practices that no matter how much we discuss, we always want to have more. Today, we are celebrating 5 years of GST. And I think High Court has come out as a savior to all of us, because if we look at the things, we do not have any appropriate mechanism at the departmental level. And in the end, we get recourse in the High Court. whether we talk about search and seizure, whether we talk about ITC, or whether we talk about any other area where we are stuck in our everyday practice, we see that ultimately we go to High Court to find the solutions. So I've been asked to present some High Court judgments. Since the time is very short with us, and I think it is too much of knowledge and too little a time, and it really becomes difficult to absorb on the other side. So what I have done is I have taken select judgments, and in fact only 3 judgments, in which 2 are very small and 1 is the longish one. And the idea is to connect the result of these judgments or whatever has happened with our day-to-day practice area. So सबसे पहले I will talk about the judgment on summons or the documents which are issued by the department by multiple authorities, because I feel this is the problem which many of us share. So very interestingly, we find that there are some judgments which becomes very famous, which are landmark judgments, and then everybody talks about that. They circulate in WhatsApp groups and all. And there are some judgments which are very, very important, but which go unnoticed. So the first 2 judgments which I have picked up are like these judgments only, which are very significant in their effect, but usually they may slip from the eye. So first judgment is by Calcutta High Court, April 2022, in the case of Ideal Unique Realtors Private Limited, a very simple matter. Multiple authorities उनको summon issue कर रहे हैं या कोई भी document issue कर रहे हैं for the matter which is same, like it was actually about the Tran 1 credit. उसमें कुछ objection था, तो सबसे पहले what happened, that the assessee got a notice from the GST department in 2018, जो commissionerate था. Assessee went to the commissionerate, they explained whatever documents they had to submit, they submitted all those documents. Then again in 2018 only, they received a summon from the DGGI on the same matter. They again went to DGGI, they represented, they submitted whatever papers they asked for. Then second time from the DGGI in 2019, again they received a summon. They again went, they submitted all the documents and they represented themselves. And then in 2021, from the Audit Commissionerate, they received a spot memo and this SSCA FAP4 regarding the same matter, highlighting the same thing. So now this time they went to High Court. I think we all know that this happens with all of us. On the same matter, even from the DGGI, we keep receiving summons even if the period of 1 year or 2 years has passed. You will receive one summon, you may go, you may represent, you even give the statement, और उसके बाद वो क्लोज भी हो जाता है सम्मन. फिर पता चलता है 6 महीने 8 महीने के बाद आपको दोबारा उसी मैटर के ऊपर सम्मन आ गया. और इंटरेस्टिंगली ऐसा भी होता है कि दूसरे ऑफिसर ने इशू कर दिया और कभी कभी दूसरे ग्रुप के ऑफिसर ने भी इशू कर दिया, ऐसा भी होता है. बट वी नीड टू नो कि इन दिस केस वी कैन एक्चुअली प्लेस आवर रिजर्वेशन. तो कैसे, अभी कोर्ट ने जब देखा इसको तो हाउ कोर्ट हैज डील्ड विद इट, तो कोर्ट ने कहा कि क्वेश्चन ये है पहले कि उन्होंने डिपार्टमेंट ने इसको इस फैशन में डील किया क्यों, वाज द पर्पस हैरेसमेंट. एंड देन दे सेड, जो एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बात इस जजमेंट में से निकल के आती है कि जब भी एक नया कम्युनिकेशन होता है डिपार्टमेंट से, तो क्या जो पुराना जजमेंट है दैट हैज बीन टेकन टू अ लॉजिकल एंड. So, yani, without taking your old response into consideration and without taking your old interactions into account and without taking them to the logical end, you are again called for investigation. As Sudipta was saying, which is very correct, कि अगर हम fundamental समझे investigation के या summon के, तो वो क्या है? That is only a temporary activity. That is an activity to fix an allegation on us, and once that is framed, आपका charge sheet frame हो जाए, investigation करके suppose they reach to a conclusion that you are not correct, then they have to issue a show cause notice and the judicial process has to start. So the purpose of investigation is to concretize the charges practically. But what happens here, that our investigation never comes to an end. We just keeps on rolling in the state of abeyance, and people keep on going for the investigation, keep on depositing money, keep on interacting. It is like harassment kind of a situation. So the court said कि भाई जब तुम्हारा नया communication issue हुआ, क्या उसके पहले जो पुराना communication है, had it reached to logical end? which was not the case here. उन्होंने कुछ भी नहीं किया उसका. And very conveniently, this also has been observed in the judgment. The court said very conveniently, the new communication never refers to the old communication. तो इसके अंदर again, I mean, definitely the judgment was that court ordered that the appropriate authority, आप में से जो भी appropriate authority है, DGGI में भी they said to DGGI कि आप इसको पहले जो इन्होंने जमा कराया है उसके basis पे you reach to a logical end, then until then सारा जो new communication है issued by the audit commissionerate that was quashed. अब ये तो judgment है. अब इसके अंदर से हमारे लिए takeaway क्या है? The takeaway for us is that if something like this happens to us, we need to write back to the department. The one thing which we actually do not do, which we need to do, always, whenever, अभी जब हमें सम्मन भी आते हैं, हम क्या करते हैं, सम्मन को लेकर के और डॉक्यूमेंट्स को लेकर के पहुंच जाते हैं और अपने कवरिंग लेटर में सिर्फ क्या लिखते हैं, जैसा कि आपने बोला था, we are bringing XYZ. That's it. That's not the way to respond to the summons. That is the biggest thing which we need to consider how to deal with the department. जहां पर कि आप जब आप उसको रिप्लाई कर रहे हैं और आपके साथ अगर कुछ ऐसा होता है, you please mention the judgment. You अगर आपके पास जजमेंट नहीं भी है, but a logical mind would say that कि भाई मैं तो पहले भी आया था, उसका क्या हुआ? So the point is that उसने अपने सम्मन के अंदर हो सकता है पुराना चीज आपके, ऐसा तो बहुत ही बार होता है कि सेम लिखा हुआ मैटर आपको बार बार मिल जाता है सम्मन के ऊपर डिस्पाइट द अर्लियर प्रोसीडिंग. तो यू नीड टू ब्रिंग इट इनटू नोटिस दैट आई रिसीव्ड सच एंड सच सम्मन ऑन सच एंड सच डेट, दिस हैपेंड एंड इट डिड नॉट रीच टू लॉजिकल कंक्लूजन. अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस जजमेंट देयर शुड बी अ लॉजिकल कंक्लूजन बिफोर यू इशू मी द नेक्स्ट थिंग. या तो उसकी एडिशन में आप कुछ मांगोगे, जो पहले मांगा है वो कुछ नहीं कहोगे, आपने वो देख लिया है, नाउ इट इज अ नेक्स्ट स्टेप, देन इट इज फाइन. So I think to my mind, I found this a very important judgment to share with you. Another judgment, which is again a small judgment, not very famous, but very, very important. यहाँ पर क्या हो रहा है, उस वाले केस में क्या हो रहा था कि multiple authorities, DGGI, Commissionerate and Audit, they were issuing summons for the same thing. Here what is happening, the same authority DGGI is issuing multiple summons to the same party. From 14th December 2020 to 4th February 2022, they issued summons 20 times. Sometimes वो कभी phone पर भी बोल देते हैं ना, sometimes maximum they issued summons in writing and sometimes they issued summons verbally only. So in that situation, the what bichara assessee, what he was doing, many times he could not go, but most of the times he went, he attended the summons, he deposited documents, submitted documents, and he deposited money also on some occasions. जब जितना डरा लिया उतना पैसा डाल दिया. It was like that. But इस पूरे प्रोसेस में show cause notice was never issued. ये भी एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग एस्पेक्ट है हमारे समन प्रोसीडिंग में कि when we go to the department to attend for the summons, what should we seek as an outcome? हमको लगता है क्लोजर हो जाए. What is the closure of a summon? क्लोजर ऑफ अ समन दो ही तरीके से हो सकता है, या तो वो ये लिख दे कि मुझे कुछ नहीं मिला, इनका सब बहुत ठीक है, which never happens. What is the other formal closure which you would want? We would want to have a show cause notice issued so that my proceedings get converted from the criminal proceedings or these kind of proceedings to the judicial proceedings. तो जिसके अंदर आपको harassment नहीं होगा, आपको जो भी प्रेजेंट करना है, you can present it through documentation and there will be no fear कि भाई मैं जाऊंगा तो what will happen with me. So anyways, इस वाले केस के अंदर 2 साल में भी उनको कोई 1.5 साल के अंदर प्रैक्टिकली कोई भी शो कॉज नोटिस इशू नहीं हुआ. 20 बार सम्मन बुला दिया और बहुत बार पैसे भी जमा करा दिए. तो what the court said, court actually understood that what is happening. So the Bombay High Court said कि डिपार्टमेंट शेल इंडिकेट, उन्होंने डिपार्टमेंट को बोला इस मैटर पर हमें इंफॉर्मेशन दो और बताओ हाउ मेनी टाइम्स यू इश्यूड द सम्मन और एवरी टाइम व्हाट वाज द पर्पस ऑफ दैट सम्मन. इट्स अ ह्यूज थिंग. एंड देन दे सेड दैट कि तुमने ये जो किया उसके बाद तुम्हारा प्रोग्रेस क्या था, यानी एक तरीके का रिपोर्ट कार्ड दे आस्क्ड टू द डिपार्टमेंट. व्हेन दे हैव डन सो, देन दे सेड इसका कॉपी एडिशनल डीजीजीआई पुणे को दे दीजिए. हु इज एडिशनल डीजीजीआई पुणे? द हेड ऑफ द that DGGI authority which was issuing summon. So that means एक और इसके अंदर आपको मैसेज आता है कि अगर कभी भी आप किसी भी डिपार्टमेंट के साथ डील कर रहे हैं, always write to the highest officer if something like this is happening with you, which you think is not in line with the law, or which you think there is some extra consideration on their part, that there is some extra reason why they are doing so, always mark a copy to the highest officer of that particular investigating agency, so that that person, that the highest officer can see what is happening down the line. तो कोर्ट ने बोला कि ठीक है, यानी कोर्ट हेल्ड दिस, कोर्ट विल हेल्ड रिस्पॉन्सिबल whom? The highest official. So they said एक कॉपी ऑर्डर का उनको दे दो, और फिर उन्होंने कहा कि हमको रिपीटेड कंप्लेंट मिल रहा है हैरेसमेंट का. अब द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग which is important for every SSC, they said department shall issue norms as to how many times such summons can be issued and for what purpose. This is something which all of us should seek, whether by way of RTI, whether by way of request to the government, whether by way of anything. Because abhi kya hai ki hame nahi malum, there is no limit to their authority in their mind. Of course, we can go to High Court, we can take a recourse to the other laws. But here, if we follow this judgment, maybe someday, because department will have to respond to this one way or the other. But this direction, if it gets followed, and if they indicate the norm, how many times such summons can be issued and what should be the purpose of summons, maybe that will save many of the assessees from the harassment. Then we come to the judgment of the year, I would say. In fact, ye jo judgment hai, I will say it is, it was much awaited. It was, I think I really freaked out when I saw this judgment. Munjal Manish Bhai Bhatt versus Union of India by Gujarat High Court, 6th May 2022, because ये एक policy matter है. और अभी तक जो हम बात कर रहे हैं जजमेंट्स की, यूजुअली whenever you see the judgments from the High Court, they are on the procedures mainly. ये वो judgment है which is actually hitting the law as such, और ये आज के law को नहीं hit कर रहा है. Since the time of service tax में of course there were some ways out, but still by and large it was followed. But this time in GST they said that अब इसका issue क्या है judgment का, कि जब भी हम कंस्ट्रक्टेड प्रॉपर्टी को खरीदते हैं जिसके अंदर हम इंस्टॉलमेंट बेसिस पर खरीद रहे हैं, मतलब विच इज नॉट अ फुल्ली डेवलप्ड प्रॉपर्टी, वेयर व्हेनेवर वी बाय अ प्रॉपर्टी एंड वी मेक एनी पेमेंट बिफोर द कंप्लीशन ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टी, देन इट बिकम्स अ वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. और हम उसकी पूरी कंसिडरेशन पर, अगर 2 करोड़ का आपने मकान खरीदा है जिसमें कुछ लैंड वैल्यू है और कुछ कंस्ट्रक्शन की वैल्यू है बाय वे ऑफ इंस्टॉलमेंट्स, तो उस केस में आप क्या करते हो, पूरे 2 करोड़ के ऊपर 18% टैक्स है, लेकिन वैल्यू के अंदर आपको 1/3 अबेटमेंट मिल जाता है. और इसके कारण, और 1/3 अबेटमेंट क्यों मिलता है, दे से दिस 1/3 अबेटमेंट इज टुवर्ड्स द कॉस्ट ऑफ द लैंड, वैल्यू ऑफ द लैंड इन द टोटल कंसिडरेशन. यानी अगर 2 करोड़ रुपए का आपने खरीदा है मकान, तो उसके अंदर उसका जो 1/3 वैल्यू है, यानी 66 लाख रुपीस के करीब, वो आपका कॉस्ट ऑफ लैंड है, और बाकी की वैल्यू पर आप 18% दे दीजिए, तो प्रैक्टिकली 12% टैक्स बन जाता है आपके प्रॉपर्टी के ऊपर. तो अभी एक बहुत ही एक फंडामेंटल बात इस जजमेंट के अंदर आई कि भाई ये जो 1/3 वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड है, व्हाई इट शुड नॉट बी रिप्लेस्ड विद एक्चुअल वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड, क्योंकि एक्चुअल वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड में भी मच हायर देन दी 1/3 वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड. लेकिन ये जो डीमिंग फिक्शन क्रिएट किया गया है कि जिसके अंदर हम लैंड की वैल्यू 1/3 लेंगे, दे से द petitioner said that this deeming fiction is actually violative of the basic scheme of the GST law, and it is also violative of Article 14. उन्होंने इसके फैक्ट्स क्या हैं कि एक बायर ने एक अग्रीमेंट किया एक डेवलपर के साथ, जिसके अंदर उसने ऑलरेडी डेवलप्ड लैंड था. ही पेड सम मनी फॉर दैट ऑलरेडी डेवलप्ड लैंड, एंड देन ही सेड टू द डेवलपर कि इसके कुछ हिस्से पर मेरे लिए एक बंगलो बना दो. लाइक इट इज सपोज इट इज 1000 स्क्वायर यार्ड्स लैंड, एंड ही सेड इसके जो 200 स्क्वायर यार्ड्स है इसके ऊपर मेरे लिए एक बंगलो बना दो. तो अब जो, और उसके अंदर सेपरेट कंसिडरेशन डिफाइन कर दिया कि लैंड के टुवर्ड्स आई विल पे दिस मच, एंड जो आपका कंस्ट्रक्शन होगा टुवर्ड्स दिस आई विल गिव दिस मच वैल्यू. नाउ द क्वेश्चन वाज, अंडर द जीएसटी लॉ इट वाज अ कंबाइंड कंसिडरेशन ऑफ लैंड एंड बिल्डिंग, जिसके अंदर 1/3 अबेटमेंट के बाद आपको पूरे पर टैक्स देना है. बट द कंटेंशन वाज कि वो जो मैंने लैंड लिया है वो तो अलग से है, और लैंड इज नॉट टैक्सेबल. under the land is the supply of land is not covered under the GST law. So whatever value is attributable to the land, that should not be taxed. So that is how the contention occurred in this case. तो डिपार्टमेंट ने बोला कि नहीं, पूरा 1/3 के ऊपर टैक्स लगेगा because of that entry, क्योंकि these people went for the advance ruling and they got to know कि ये तो 1/3, उन्होंने कहा नहीं इस पे तो पूरे पे लगेगा. So they paid under protest the tax and then they came for this case. तो फिर उन्होंने जो law point दिए, they are, I will say they are marvel. I mean, it is actually a beautiful work done by the advocates. उन्होंने बोला कि जो रेट एंट्री है जो कि 1/3 वैल्यू एक्सक्लूड कर रही है, दैट इज अ डीमिंग फिक्शन व्हिच हैज बीन क्रिएटेड. एंड वेरी इंटरेस्टिंगली, जो डीमिंग फिक्शन है, कब आएगा डीमिंग फिक्शन? एक लॉजिक, एक तो ठीक है, देयर इज अ लीगल ट्रेजेक्टरी कि जहां पर ज्यूरिस्प्रूडेंस है कि गैन एंड डंकरले हुआ एंड देयर हैव बीन मेनी माइलस्टोन जजमेंट्स ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. बट अगर लॉजिकली भी देखेंगे, डीमिंग फिक्शन को आप कब लेके आओगे पिक्चर में? व्हेन द एक्चुअल इज नॉट अवेलेबल. सो द पॉइंट इज, when the actual cost of land or actual value of land is available in a transaction, why you are bringing a deeming fiction saying कि हम तो land की value को 1/3 मानेंगे? Because the moment you said कि हम land की value को 1/3 मानेंगे, और suppose जो actual value है land की, that is 2/3 या कुछ भी, any higher amount, so practically what you are doing, you are levying GST on that part of the value of land which was in excess to the 1/3 of the value. तो यानी आप उसके ऊपर टैक्स लगा रहे हो जो कि जीएसटी के अंदर टैक्सेबल ही नहीं है. दैट इज द क्रक्स ऑफ द पॉइंट. बट लेट अस सी हाउ दे प्रेजेंटेड द टेक्निकल देयर आर्गुमेंट्स टेक्निकली. तो उन्होंने बोला कि पहले तो इन्होंने डीमिंग फिक्शन यूज किया, और जो सेल ऑफ लैंड है दैट इज नॉट टैक्सेबल अंडर जीएसटी बिकॉज वो शेड्यूल 3 में लिखा हुआ है कि वो जो सेल ऑफ लैंड है दैट इज कवर्ड अंडर शेड्यूल 3 व्हिच इज नॉट अ सप्लाई. इट इज नीदर अ सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स नॉर अ सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विस. एंड देन दे सेज कि प्रैक्टिकली वो उस तरीके से क्या कर रहे हैं, हमारे लैंड की वैल्यू पर टैक्स लगा रहे हैं, और इस तरीके से दे आर एक्सीडिंग, दे आर गोइंग बियॉन्ड द जुरिस्डिक्शन ऑफ द जीएसटी लॉ. तो इट इज वायलेटिव ऑफ जीएसटी लॉ एंड इट इज आल्सो वायलेटिव ऑफ आर्टिकल 14 ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बिकॉज इट इज आर्बिट्रेरी. फिर उन्होंने और क्या कहा, उन्होंने ये अगेन जो ये एक पॉइंट है जो कि इसके हर्ट में है, इस मैटर के हर्ट में, कि आप डीमिंग फिक्शन को कैसे यूज कर लोगे जब मेरे पास एक्चुअल वैल्यू है लैंड का. इसके लिए दे ब्रॉट आउट मेनी जजमेंट, मेजरली गैन एंड डंकरले ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम. द डिफरेंट डिसीजंस वर टेकन एंड इट हैज बीन कैटेगोरिकली सेड दैट डीमिंग फिक्शन तभी आएगा. इवन इन द केस ऑफ कस्टम्स एक्ट क्या हुआ था कि विप्रो का केस है कि कस्टम्स में जब इंपोर्ट होता था वो 1% लोडिंग अनलोडिंग चार्जेस लगा देते थे value के addition में, and it was held that when the actual value is available, why you are using the rider of 1% or the fiction of 1%. So on the same basis this was argued here. तो और साथ में इन्होंने एक और बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग आर्गुमेंट दिया. उन्होंने बोला कि ये जो 14 जीएसटी काउंसिल में डिस्कस हुआ था जब ये एंट्री बन रहा था 1/3 का, तो उन्होंने कहा कि उस समय पर जो ट्रांजेक्शन थी सामने, वो ट्रांजेक्शन थी फ्लैट्स के सेल की ट्रांजेक्शन, जिसके अंदर अनडिवाइडेड वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड, वैल्यू ऑफ अनडिवाइडेड लैंड होता है. इट इज ओनली द इंटरेस्ट इन द लैंड. तो एट टाइम्स इट मे नॉट बी मेजरेबल. तो क्योंकि फ्लैट्स के उस केस में जहां पर अनडिवाइडेड शेयर हो रहा है, तो पॉसिबली द वैल्यू इज नॉट कैलकुलेबल, द एक्चुअल वैल्यू इज नॉट अवेलेबल. इन दैट केस यू कैन टेक डीमिंग फिक्शन. जबकि इस वाले केस में क्या था कि इट वाज अ लैंड, यू नो, कंप्लीट लैंड, इट वाज नो फ्लैट and sale of land, and उसके ऊपर एक बंगलो बनना था. तो they says कि if we go to the minutes of the GST Council, then we will find that this discussion is reflecting it is not meant for that kind of transaction. Then लेकिन उसके बाद जो इन्होंने एंट्री बनाई, even after that discussion in the GST Council, उस एंट्री को ऐसे बनाया जिसके अंदर फ्लैट और जो इंडिविजुअल प्रॉपर्टी है दोनों कवर हो गए. और फिर एक सबसे ज्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट लिखे आए. They said कि सेक्शन, क्योंकि इट इज अबाउट वैल्यूएशन, एंड वैल्यूएशन किससे कवर है? सेक्शन 15 से, पूरे जीएसटी लॉ में. और सेक्शन 15 सबसेक्शन 1 which is the main primary section of valuation, it says कि ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू इज द वैल्यू जिसके ऊपर जीएसटी लगना चाहिए. ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू इज व्हाट? इट इज एक्चुअली द एक्चुअल वैल्यू पेड और पेएबल. तो उस वाले हिसाब से भी डीमिंग फिक्शन अप्लाई नहीं होता, बिकॉज व्हेन आई हैव एक्चुअल वैल्यू तो 15(1) में मेरे को ये वाली वैल्यू पर टैक्स होना चाहिए. लेकिन एक एक्सेप्शन है इसका 15(5) में, वो कहता है कि notwithstanding anything contained in 15(1), जो गवर्नमेंट है they can prescribe the manner of valuation of any transaction. लेकिन जब हम प्रिस्क्राइब का मीनिंग देखने के लिए जाते हैं तो प्रिस्क्राइब करने के लिए जो तरीका बताया गया लॉ में, दैट इज प्रिस्क्राइब बाय रूल्स. और अभी कैसे प्रिस्क्राइब है? इट इज प्रिस्क्राइब्ड इन द रेट नोटिफिकेशन. सो टेक्निकली ऑल्सो द पिटिशनर सेड कि even they cannot prescribe any other value apart from 15(1) value by way of section 15(5) because it has not been done by way of rules. It has been done by way of simple notification of rate. Then what were the contentions of the department? Each and every point or para in this judgment is actually worth reading and understanding. It says department इसी पर है कि constitution has given very wide powers to the government to tax, so it is our sole prerogative how to tax a transaction. And then again they said 15(5) मुझे एम्पावर करता है कि मैं किसी भी ट्रांजेक्शन के लिए कोई भी तरीका दे सकता हूँ वैल्यू करने का, टेक्निकल्स पर वो आए नहीं. फिर वो कहते हैं कि गवर्नमेंट के पास एक्सप्रेस पावर है कि हम वैल्यू डिटरमिन कर लें अगर मेरी काउंसिल मुझे रिकमेंड कर देगी. अगर देखा जाए तो ये काउंसिल के रिकमेंडेशन की जो कहानी है, ये दैट नाउ विद मोहित मिनरल्स ऑर्डर, इसके ऊपर भी दोबारा से उनको थॉट देना पड़ेगा. Then prescribing deemed value of land is not beyond the scope of 9(1) of CGST Act, which is very, very important. Section 9(1) क्या है? Section 9 define करता है कि chargeability किस चीज पर है GST के अंदर. Chargeability किस चीज पर है? Supply of goods and supply of services पर है. तो और किस पर नहीं है? जो कि मेरे शेड्यूल 3 की आइटम्स हैं. प्रैक्टिकली वो सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज में नहीं आते हैं बिकॉज इट इज सेइंग इट इज नीदर सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स नॉर सर्विसेज. तो लेकिन डिपार्टमेंट क्या कह रहा है कि 9(1) के अंदर मुझे इसकी आई हैव पावर टू टैक्स दिस सप्लाई आल्सो एंड इट इज नॉट बियॉन्ड द CGST एक्ट. और एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग आर्ग्यूमेंट है डिपार्टमेंट की. हमारे शेड्यूल 2 का जो क्लॉज 5 है वो कहता है कि कंस्ट्रक्शन की एंट्री टैक्सेबल है एज द सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में. और जो मेरा सेक्शन 7 है जो सप्लाई डिफाइन करता है वो क्या बोलता है कि ये जो शेड्यूल 2 है वो सिर्फ उसका क्या काम है शेड्यूल 2 का? शेड्यूल 2 एक नई सप्लाई क्रिएट नहीं कर सकता या सप्लाई का नया डेफिनेशन क्रिएट नहीं कर सकता. शेड्यूल 2 सिर्फ इतना बता सकता है कि इन द गिवन सप्लाई वेदर दिस सप्लाई विल कॉन्स्टिट्यूट एज गुड्स और विल कॉन्स्टिट्यूट एज सर्विस. जबकि जो इनिशियली जब GST आया था तब शेड्यूल 2 की जो कंस्ट्रक्शन थी सेक्शन 7 की, उससे लग रहा था कि शेड्यूल 2 कैन डू दैट ऑल्सो, लेकिन ये रिट्रोस्पेक्टिवली अमेंड कर दिया इस सेक्शन को. तो आज का पोजीशन ये है सप्लाई के सेक्शन में कि सप्लाई इज डिफाइंड अंडर सेक्शन 7 एंड द रोल ऑफ शेड्यूल 2 is only to the extent where if there is a supply, then whether that supply should be constituted as supply of goods or supply of service, उसके ऊपर शेड्यूल 2 कमेंट कर सकता है. तो अगर अब नाउ क्लॉज 5B ऑफ शेड्यूल 2 सेज कि भाई जो कंस्ट्रक्शन की सर्विसेज हैं उसके ऊपर वो दे विल बी कंसीडर्ड एज वर्क्स कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सर्विस. और जो मेरा शेड्यूल 3 है वो कहता है शेड्यूल 3 में जो एंट्री है जो कि सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स में नहीं है, सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विस में नहीं है, वो कैसे रीड करती है? इट्स ए सप्लाई ऑफ लैंड सब्जेक्ट टू क्लॉज 5B ऑफ शेड्यूल 2. तो डिपार्टमेंट कहता है कि क्योंकि वो जो शेड्यूल 3 की एंट्री इज सब्जेक्ट टू क्लॉज 5B ऑफ शेड्यूल 2 है, दैट इज व्हाई आई कैन टैक्स द लैंड पार्ट. This argument actually does not hold any ground, but it has been carved out by the department very smartly. Then एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग बात आई कि उन्होंने बोला कि जो पार्टीज हैं दे मे नॉट करेक्टली प्रेजेंट द वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड एंड कंस्ट्रक्शन. यानी एक जो शक है, एक परमानेंट शक डिपार्टमेंट का SSCs के ऊपर कि भाई अगर हमने इनको अलाउ कर दिया कि आप अपने अग्रीमेंट के अंदर लिख दो कि लैंड की वैल्यू कितनी है और कंस्ट्रक्शन की वैल्यू कितनी है, तो फिर वो तो सारे गलत वैल्यू लिख देंगे. वो तो जो क्योंकि लैंड की वैल्यू पर टैक्स नहीं लगेगा और कंस्ट्रक्शन की वैल्यू पर टैक्स लगेगा, तो अगर 1000 रुपए वैल्यू होगी तो वो तो 99 रुपीज तो लैंड की लिख देंगे और 1 रुपया कंस्ट्रक्शन की लिख देंगे. दैट इज व्हाट द आर्गुमेंट दे गिव. तो उसके केस में मतलब दे से कि अगर हमने ये अलाउ कर दिया तो हमें ये डर है कि जो असेसीज हैं वो टैक्स कम देंगे बाय मैनिपुलेटिंग द वैल्यू इन देयर अग्रीमेंट. And that actually shows the manner in which we are being dealt by the department every day, because we all are considered as thieves. Then the court's observation in this case, the court said that कि जो मैंडेटरी एप्लीकेशन है डीमिंग फिक्शन की जब एक्चुअल वैल्यू अवेलेबल है तो कोर्ट ने एग्री कर लिया that is against the scheme of GST and ultra vires the statutory provisions, which is actually a very, very well founded conclusion. Then it is also violative of Article 14, happy situation. And because of this, the measure of tax has no nexus with the charge. ये वाले जो maxim है, ये भी बहुत important है कि जो मेरा measure of tax है, वो charge के साथ मेल नहीं खाता, उसका nexus नहीं है. कैसे? Measure of tax क्या है कि मेरे को 18% tax देना है, जो भी. और आपका charge किस पर, आप immovable property पर tax ले नहीं सकते हो. तो अगर आपने immovable property की value को अपने taxable base की value में include कर लिया और उसके ऊपर टैक्स लगा दिया तो फिर ये मिसमैच हो गया ना, बिकॉज देयर इज नो नेक्सस विद द मेजर ऑफ टैक्स एंड द वैल्यू यू आर चार्जिंग. सो दिस अगेन इज अ वेरी सिग्निफिकेंट पॉइंट. यानी एक्स्ट्रा टेरिटोरियल तो नहीं कहेंगे इसमें, एक्स्ट्रा जो भी उनकी एक्स्ट्रा जुरिसडिक्शनल टैक्स हो गया विच यू आर चार्जिंग, जो आप नहीं चार्ज कर सकते, आपका बनता नहीं है और आप चार्ज कर रहे हैं. दिस इज व्हाट द कोर्ट हैज वेरी कैटेगोरिकली कमेंटेड अपॉन. And then they said, power to prescribe value under 15(5) should by way of rule means कि आपको इसको रूल के अंदर लाना था. अगर आपको करना भी था, आप नोटिफिकेशन से नहीं कर सकते थे. लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम while saying so, ये तो सिर्फ प्रोसीजर है. तो गवर्नमेंट क्या करेगी, वो क्या करेगी, कल ही को एक नोटिफिकेशन ले आएगी और उस नोटिफिकेशन से रूल के अंदर डाल देगी इसको, बिकॉज ये तो 2 मिनट का काम है. एंड द कोर्ट न्यू एंड द कोर्ट देयरफॉर कमेंटेड that while we said that in the present disposition this is not done correctly, तो अपनी present disposition में तो वो कर ही नहीं सकते, वो गलत ही है जो नोटिफिकेशन में लिखा है. लेकिन अगर कल को गवर्नमेंट इसको रूल्स के थ्रू ले भी आए, even then it will not become correct, क्योंकि delegated legislation cannot exceed the spirit of the statute. तो जो एक जो बेसिक स्टैट्यूट की स्पिरिट है कि लैंड को टैक्स नहीं करना, अगर वो अपना ये प्रोसीजर ठीक भी कर ले वैल्यूएशन का, तभी भी that will not become taxable. And I think this is a very, very smart move by the court, because otherwise क्या होता है ये नॉर्मल केस में कि कल ही को एक नोटिफिकेशन आ करके अच्छा यहीं पर तो गलती है, लो that is corrected. So this is one interesting part of the judgment. Then they were talking about the taxability कि भाई ये तो मेरे शेड्यूल 2 के अंदर इसको मेंशन्ड है और शेड्यूल 3 की जो एंट्री है वो सब्जेक्ट टू शेड्यूल 2 क्लॉज 5 भी है, तो इसलिए वो टैक्सेबल है. तो although you know the petitioner's argument stood very good on this ground, the court said कि भाई ये तो टैक्सेबिलिटी का इशू ही नहीं है, ये तो वैल्यूएशन का इशू है. प्रैक्टिकली टैक्सेबल तो है ही नहीं लैंड. वैसे तो देखा जाए तो स्टेप 1 इट इज द इशू ऑफ टैक्सेबिलिटी ऑल्सो, बट उसके अंदर कोई डिस्प्यूट है नहीं. दैट इज अ क्लियर कट केस दैट लैंड इज नॉट टैक्सेबल, सेल ऑफ लैंड इज नॉट टैक्सेबल under the act. Although हमारी जो definition है services की, it says anything other than goods as service, और वहां पर एक रूम है immovable property को tax करने का, but that is not the intent of the law and that is very clear to all and sundry. So therefore they say the major issue, यहाँ पर हमको taxability discuss करने की उतनी ज्यादा जरूरत नहीं है, because the major issue here is the valuation. And interestingly lastly the court said that कि जहां तक तुम्हारे fear की बात है कि लोग गलत अमाउंट लगा लेंगे टैक्स का, वहां पर हमारा ये कहना है कि रेवेन्यू ये तो किसी भी ट्रांजेक्शन में हो सकता है. आई एम गिविंग सर्विसेज टू यू, आई मे मेरी जो वैल्यू ऑफ सर्विस है मैं आधी भी ना लिखूं, दिस इज पॉसिबल. सो इट कैन, यानी वैल्यू कैन बी डिस्टॉर्टेड इन एनी ट्रांजेक्शन. तो उसके लिए आपके पास अलग मेथड्स हैं, आप ऑडिट करते हैं, आप इतने सारे आपके पास टूल्स हैं. इफ समथिंग रॉन्ग इज देयर देन यू असेस दैट रॉन्ग बाय वेरियस मेथड्स व्हिच यू डू. So the remedies are available in the law itself. Just because for the fear that somebody can write this value here and that value there, you can't twist the law like this. So that argument also went in vain. And then the conclusion, which is very, very significant from this judgment, they said that ये conclusion मैंने verbatim reproduce किया है. Conclusion लंबा है, but I think this is the relevant part. जिसके अंदर एक और बड़ा interesting काम हुआ है कि let us read it, जो highlighted है. They say the question is whether the impugned paragraph 2 needs to be struck down or the same can be saved by reading it down. Reading it down is a terminology which is I mean comparatively it is a lesser used thing in the judgments, यानी उन्होंने उसको struck down नहीं किया, उस वाले जो entry है हमारी rate entry, उन्होंने उसको read किया एक particular manner में that it will be interpreted like this only. और इसको कैसे पढ़ेंगे? While maintaining the mandatory deduction of 1/3 for the value of land is not sustainable. यानी ये mandatory नहीं है कि आप 1/3 value of land deduct करें. In the cases where the value of land is clearly ascertainable, जहां पर clearly ascertainable है value of land, वहां पर आप 1/3 deduct करना mandatory नहीं है. It can be optional on the part of the taxpayer. अगर उसकी इच्छा है तो 1/3 कर दे, नहीं तो वो actual value of land से करे. Or where the value of construction service can be derived with the aid of valuation rules. क्योंकि मेरे पास तो इतने लंबे चौड़े valuation rules हैं, तो अगर मेरे पास अगर मैं एक मेथड डिप्लॉय करना चाहता हूँ कि भाई मेरे को अपनी कंस्ट्रक्शन की वैल्यू निकालनी है, आई कैन ऑलवेज यूज साइंटिफिक मेथड्स टू असेस द वैल्यू ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्शन सर्विसेज. कंस्ट्रक्शन सर्विस ही तो मेरे को टैक्स करनी है ना, लैंड तो टैक्स करना नहीं है. तो जो मेरा कॉस्ट प्लस मेथड है, या अगर जो भी ओपन मार्केट वैल्यू से लेकर के आके लास्ट में भी zero down on the cost plus method and things like that, so that can very well be done. So yani that those methods can be deployed. One, I can have an actual value of land. Two, I can use the valuation rules to assess the value of my construction service. Then such deduction can be permitted at the option of the taxable person, particularly in the cases where the value of land or undivided share of land is not ascertainable. I think this is freaking judgment by the court, और ये बहुत long awaited था. लेकिन अभी इसके अंदर हमें मालूम है कि डिपार्टमेंट, it will be a great problem with the department in digesting this judgment, and they will definitely go to the higher forum. लेकिन इसके अंदर एक चीज जहां पर हम बार बार कोर्ट एक बात पर जोर दे रहे हैं कि अगर मेरे पास एक्चुअल वैल्यू है तो उस केस में मेरे को आई शुड गो बाय द एक्चुअल वैल्यू. So my thought here is that जब भी हम लैंड को रजिस्टर कराते हैं, even the undivided share of land in a flat, तो बहुत सारे स्टेट्स के अंदर, आई थिंक मेजॉरिटी ऑफ स्टेट्स के अंदर, द लैंड की वैल्यू अलग से रजिस्टर होती है और कंस्ट्रक्शन की वैल्यू अलग से रजिस्टर होती है. तो व्हाई कांट दे गो बाय द सर्कल रेट आइडिया फॉर द वैल्यू ऑफ लैंड or the actual registered value of land with the authority, so that all these things can be aligned and practically this anomaly can be removed. So I think this was the judgment. These were the judgments which I wanted to share for today. I really don't know the time kitna ho gaya hai. Nikita, should I close it or?
Yes, ma'am. We can take some of the questions, I think, because we are like over the time.
Yes.
Now, yeah. So, Kapil sir, you can also answer the questions if
No
that
problem.
is pertaining to the topics you have discussed.
No problem.
So,
No.
yeah. Yeah. So, first question is relating to like GST Council meet. The question is, the e-commerce operator has to set a platform of intra and interstate supply. The same question is repeated again. So because I think some exemptions are given, so that on basis of that they are asking that e-commerce operator has to set up separate platform for interstate or intrastate.
Madam, I think the question itself is not very clear, but I'll try and answer it to best possible extent.
Yeah.
So please understand, e-commerce operator refers to a mechanism wherein one person, such as example Amazon, we take Ajio, we take Flipkart, we take so many people, they are the brand owners. They operate on a platform wherein they connect two people. They are buyers and seller. The exemption that we are now reading are relating to the purchaser, or sorry, the seller's perspective. So therefore, there is no possibility that I am able to see that the e-commerce operator will set up two separate platforms for intra and interstate. Please understand, the person who are selling are the person who are claiming the exemption. The question according to me should be, if you are supplying within the state, then you are eligible to threshold. If you are supplying interstate, you are not eligible. To me, I understand, if you are doing interstate, then have a different number. Maybe do it one from proprietorship and do it one from the partnership firm. So therefore, you have two separate PAN. Take two GSTN. If you are able to keep the limit of 20 lakh within the same, then in that case, on the intra component you take the exemption and the other limit you let go. That's what, according to me, I see is the right set of addressal to the question that has been asked.
Okay. So next question is, what if goods are only packed but not labeled? I think this is in pursuance to the exemptions which has been withdrawn on like goods package.
To answer that question, I think even if you pack, the requirement of Legal Metrology Act comes into picture. You need to give certain disclosures such as who is packing, what is the company, what is the time and it has been packed, what is the commodity it has been held. So accordingly, even if you pack it on a predetermined quality, take a simple example of dal and pulses, sugar, grocery item which you go and buy in stock. So they are generally packed in 250, 500 and a kilo pack. Now, even if these packs, even if they are done under a brand, they are required to follow all the requirements which are there in LMA, Legal Metrology Act. So even if you pack it, the requirement of labeling will definitely kick in, sir. The exemption will apply if you are doing packing when the customer has demanded. In that case, exemption apply. Otherwise, you will be required to follow the labeling requirements.
Okay. So I hope it is clear. Now, next question is ITC for March 2019 claimed by filing return on 27th November 2019. Department issuing notice of disallowance of ITC since claimed after due date. Can we go in appeal and expect just a second? Can we expect relief of tax and interest penalty charged?
Ma'am, problem hai. I think the simple thing is the law has given you a time frame to follow. That time frame needs to be followed sacrosanctly. Now, if the time limit has been given by September, which means effectively by 20th of October, wherein you file your 3B, that is the last return wherein you can claim a credit of a preceding financial year. Now, if you have done it in the month of November, that means you have done it beyond date. In that case, the limit, the time limit has gone by. There is no mechanism available in law which gives you any kind of extended timeline or power to any officer to give you any extension with respect to these actions. You may go and file all these appeal, etc. But per se, I see very difficulty in these cases in getting any kind of relief because the timeline has been specified in Act itself.
Okay. Now I think last question is pertaining to Rohini ma'am. Whether rehab flats in Mumbai will be taxed on new flats at current prices?
Ma'am, आप mute पे हैं, Rohini ma'am. You're on mute.
Sorry. ये अभी एक मिनट क्वेश्चन रिपीट करेंगे निकिता?
Whether rehab flats in Mumbai will be taxed on new flats at current prices? I think they mean to say that new flat rates at current prices.
New flats at current prices. See, the point is, as from the GST perspective, what I understand that जो flats हैं, अगर आप already अगर उसका deal हो चुका है, if they are then तो there must be some price fixed already under the agreement. You must be constructing them. Then whatever is price on the agreement will be the price. But if it is actually constructed flats, then तो there is no issue at all. बट मेरे को एक्चुअली क्वेश्चन समझ नहीं आया, तो अगर आप जिसने भी पूछा उनसे पूछ लें कि उनका एंगल क्या है क्वेश्चन पूछने का, तो देन इट विल बी अ बेटर आंसर.
Lakshman ji, I think if you can write it in a more proper manner, then we will be able to answer your question. Till then, we are taking next question. They say, I have an issue that my output liability is rupees 10,000, but I have a credit note of rupees 15,000. Can I reduce my liability by rupees 10,000 through credit note and balances carry forwarded to the next month, or can I claim rupees 5,000 as refund?
आउटपुट लायबिलिटी इनकी 10,000 है, क्रेडिट नोट जो है उसके अंदर 15,000 का क्रेडिट है इनके पास, तो वो प्रॉपर प्रोसीजर के साथ तो होगा ना. जीएसटीआर 1 में वो पहले दिखाएंगे अपना क्रेडिट नोट और 3B के अंदर अकॉर्डिंगली दे विल रिड्यूस देयर लायबिलिटी.
आई थिंक मैम ने आंसर कर दिया है. आपकी लायबिलिटी कम है, क्रेडिट नोट का अमाउंट ज्यादा है, डेफिनेटली अलाउड है, और जो डिफरेंशियल 5,000 है वो आप आगे नेक्स्ट मंथ में लेके जा सकते हो. सिंपल एज दैट.
हाँ, इसमें एक और बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट है कि अभी तक क्या हो रहा था कि जो एक मुझे लगता है क्वेश्चन का जो एंगल रहा होगा इनका कि क्योंकि 15,000 है और 10,000 लाइबिलिटी है, तो यस आई थिंक एज कपिल जी हैज आंसर्ड कि 10,000 कर लो, 5,000 अगली बार कर सकते हो। तो अभी हमारी GSTN के जो वाइस चेयरमैन है उनसे बात हो रही थी इस बारे में, क्योंकि 3B के अंदर नेगेटिव वो अलाउड नहीं होता, तो दे आर एक्चुअली वर्किंग ऑन दैट। मे बी इन अ मंथ और 2 आपको 3B के अंदर भी वो फैसिलिटी मिल जाएगी वेयर you can have a negative figure so that automatically gets adjusted turnover next time.
Yeah, I also think so that they were talking about GST at 3B only. Yeah.
मैम जनरली उसमें क्या कर रहे हैं प्रैक्टिस में लोग, वो नेगेटिव फिगर ना ले जाके 10 माइनस करके ना क्रेडिट 5,000 रुपए बढ़ा रहे हैं, बिकॉज उसमें कोई तरीका ही नहीं है ना एडजस्टमेंट करने का।
नहीं वो ठीक है, बट देन दैट इज इनकरेक्ट ना टेक्निकली, एंड ऑफ द डे प्रॉब्लम आती है उसमें।
हाँ फिर वो 2B में नहीं आ रहा ना, देयरफॉर यू हैव अ प्रॉब्लम।
पर वो गलती सिर्फ तुम्हारी है ना, GST का मतलब ये।
करेक्ट, तो आप उसमें ये नहीं कह सकते ना कि मैं क्रेडिट कैरी फॉरवर्ड अलाउ नहीं करूंगा एसेंशियली।
कुछ भी होता है, कल मान लो आज तो हमने कर लिया क्योंकि हम लोग चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स हैं, तो जमा घटा करके सब बराबर कर देते हैं। बट द पॉइंट इज अगर मेरा लॉ अलाउ नहीं कर रहा है, तो ये तो कल को ये जब मैचेस करते हैं ना अपने ARM GST उसके अंदर अपने आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस से, तो फिर चिट्ठियां आती हैं।
हाँ मैम, इसमें ना हमने लास्ट में ना एक रिप्रेजेंटेशन में डाला था, GST इनको भी डाला था कॉपी करते हुए, जहाँ पे हमने विद रिस्पेक्ट टू रियल एस्टेट सेक्टर लिखा था कि एक मंथ में क्या होता है। मैम वहाँ तो ना टाइम बेस पे डिमांड होती है। अब मेरी बिल्डिंग पूरी हो गई जो डिमांड हो गई, तो मंथ में तो दबादब टैक्स चला गया, नेक्स्ट मंथ में बहुत सारे क्रेडिट नोट आ गए, तो मेरी लाइबिलिटी माइनस हो गई, फिर अगली लाइबिलिटी 8-10 महीने बाद आती है। तो देयर आर वेरियस एग्जांपल जहाँ पे ना ये हम रिप्रेजेंटेशन इन दी पास्ट वी हैव पुट इन ऑलरेडी। तो जहाँ पे उनका रिप्लाई तो नहीं आया पर से, बट इन द कोर्स ऑफ डिस्कशन दे हैव सेड देयर इज नो मेजर व्हिच वी कैन से उनको भी सिस्टम में चेंज अडॉप्ट करने हैं, उनके सिस्टम में कैपेबिलिटी नहीं है।
बट मतलब सिचुएशन ये है कि अगर आप कर भी दो ना इस तरीके का, तो बेटर टू राइट,
लिख दो। उन्होंने भी यही बोला प्रिसाइसली मैम, उन्होंने भी बोला आप करके ना चिट्ठी जुडिक्शन में डाल दो, ताकि कल को कोई मैलिफाइड बोल के आपको पेनल्टी ना इम्पोज करे।
यस।
So ma'am, Lakshman ji has again put up the question. He is saying redevelopment flats in Mumbai, and will new flats pay GST on market rate? I think these are two questions again.
Redevelopment GST market rate पर क्यों होगा? GST तो हमेशा ही ट्रांजैक्शन वैल्यू पर होगा। पर अभी जो मैं मेरे जो डिस्कशन के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अगर मैं इस क्वेश्चन को समझने की कोशिश करूं, तो ये जो गुजरात के हाई कोर्ट का जजमेंट है, कल को अगर हम ये सवाल उनका मैं ऐसे फ्रेम करूं कि भाई जो अब मेरा जो नया फ्लैट बिकेगा उसके अंदर लैंड की भी वैल्यू है और उसके अंदर कंस्ट्रक्शन की भी वैल्यू है, तो अब जब मैं एग्रीमेंट करूं तो क्या मैं सिर्फ कंस्ट्रक्शन की वैल्यू पर GST दूं, लैंड की वैल्यू पर नहीं दूं? बिकॉज लैंड की वैल्यू के लिए मेरे पास एक्चुअल का प्रूफ है, एविडेंस है कि भाई ये इतनी है, तो क्या ये जजमेंट लगा सकते हैं? आई वुड से हाँ लगा सकते हैं, बट डेफिनेटली दिस विल बी फ्रॉम द डिपार्टमेंट साइड, इट विल बी सब्जेक्ट टू डिस्प्यूट, बट येस दिस कॉल मे बी टेकन बिकॉज एक हाई कोर्ट का जजमेंट है, तो वो जब तक कि कुछ और नेगेटिव नहीं आता वहां से, तो इट शुड अप्लाई टू अस, बट येस इट विल बी सब्जेक्ट टू रिस्क।
Okay, so I think that's all for the day. Whether there is any move to reduce monthly GST return compliance?
लगता तो नहीं है, मतलब although जो GST नेटवर्क है they are talking about facilitating many things, पर जो monthly compliance को quarterly बना दे ऐसा कुछ नहीं लग रहा।
Okay, so I think that's all the questions the participants wants to ask. So thank you, Rohini ma'am. Thank you for such a wonderful session. I think you have explained the judgments in very simple manner so that everyone can understand like all the aspects and the decisions which are passed in the judgment. So thank you so much for that. So one more question they have asked is, I have ITC on purchases and services of rent, etc., and was selling goods and adjusting ITC of purchases. This ITC was accumulated related to services of rent, etc. Now I have sale through store SEZ. Do I need to reverse whole ITC now?
एक सेकेंड, आपका क्वेश्चन है मैं अगला पढ़ लिया था, which is very interesting, so I started laughing on that. Somebody has written our ex-FM said that GST has birth defect. I really agree, it has birth defects. So now I will just read another question which you have just read. I have ITC on purchases and services of rent, etc., and was selling goods and adjusting ITC of purchases. This ITC was accumulated related to services of rent, etc. Now I have sale through store. Store SEZ. Store SEZ means what? Do I need to reverse whole ITC now? नहीं, रिवर्स क्यों करना है? आपके पास एक एलिजिबल आईटीसी है, एज आई अंडरस्टैंड, और आपके पास आउटपुट सेल ऐसी नहीं है जिसके ऊपर टैक्स लग रहा है, ये कहना चाह रहे हैं शायद। क्योंकि इनकी जो सारी सेल है वो एसईजेड को हो रही है, इसलिए ये आउटपुट को टैक्स नहीं लगा रहे हैं अपने, तो इनके पास आईटीसी पड़ा हुआ है। देखिए एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग एस्पेक्ट है इस लॉ की कि जो आईटीसी आपके पास आ गया और वो एलिजिबल है, वो आप कभी भी यूज कर सकते हैं। वो आपका बैड आईटीसी नहीं है, इट इज गुड आईटीसी, एलिजिबल आईटीसी। ये ठीक है कि आज की डेट में आपके पास कोई आउटपुट लायबिलिटी नहीं है बिकॉज यू आर सेलिंग थ्रू एसईजेड, तो आप नहीं उसको यूज कर पा रहे हैं, बट मे बी एट सम पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम इन फ्यूचर यू यूज इट। व्हाई यू वांट टू रिवर्स इट? बिकॉज इट इज एन एसेट विद यू एंड लॉ डज नॉट रिक्वायर यू टू रिवर्स इट।
If any of the participants want to ask any question, then they can post it. Otherwise, we'll be ending this session. So I think that's all for the day. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Kapil sir.
Pleasure, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, so before ending the session, I just want to tell you again about the like CA week special offer, an offer where CA professionals can give a brand new online presence to their CA firm with a professional website by virtual offers at an initial amount booking of ₹1,999. You can claim this special offer just by giving us a call on the number presented in this image, or by emailing us on the displayed mail ID. So, and you can also scan the QR code given here for WhatsApp. Thanking all of you. It was a wonderful session. Thank you so much.